Okay. So, it's February 13th, 2018, and I'm calling the Board of Health meeting to order. This was a meeting scheduled for last week, but we had a snow night, so. So ordinarily, I would announce any items to be added as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting, but I don't know that we have any.
I do have,
Oh, you do
well,
have one?
we can add a very quick, just comment about vaccine for next year's flu clinic,
Oh,
or
okay.
the flu clinic later this year, so that we can add that.
Okay. All right.
And then a change to the caucus date, just to confirm,
Oh, I didn't know.
yeah.
Okay. All right, so do we have a motion to add those two items to the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's see, so we have our distinguished guest this evening is Building Inspector Chris Canny, or do you prefer Christopher? Okay. So we just want to catch up on building permit application. Seems like there've been some things that come to us, some things that don't. You know, kind of what's the new standard? Probably for the mic. Thank you. For me to drink this.
This is so much more official over here.
Fine.
It's got a placard.
Oh,
I know.
and then another question was about permit application fees that people pay when they're submitting something, and so I think they used to pay up front, and now they pay when they come to pick up the permit, but we were talking to advisory, because of course they're always concerned about payment for services that the town is giving. And so I know our board, and I assume you and maybe others, end up reviewing plans sometimes before they get a permit and might influence, you know, changes that are needed or something like that. And it doesn't seem like, you know, maybe it's a little anecdotal, but not as many plans get then to the permit stage where they've paid. So we're kind of reviewing a higher percentage that don't get paid for. So we just want to understand that, so that
Sure.
advisory understands we're bringing in kind of less money to cover
Right. So
costs.
I guess let's start with the fee part, because I think that's sort of easier to tackle.
Okay,
Yeah, right now we're collecting building and health fees after the fact upon pickup of permits, which is not ideal, because clearly there are times when a review is done and a permit can never be issued, but the town is not reimbursed for the review. So we've been talking between myself and Ellen and the collector about how to deal with that. Additionally, people sometimes get confused when I send them the fee and the Board of Health fee is rolled into the building fee, and they have to have this whole explainer as far as why. Well, what did the Board of Health do? I said, well, they reviewed your whole application. So we're talking about at least breaking the two fees apart, which would enable the Board of Health to get paid up front for their fees. Right now, the way that Nancy in collecting is telling me, to make the building permit fee paid up front, a lot of people pay online, and it's hard to have them pay online if they don't know what the fee is ahead of time. So coming into the office, they would have to have prepaid, basically, to be able to take the application in. So we're trying to sort that out. So in the meantime, we said, why don't we separate out the Board of Health fee, which is 99% of the time a $25 fee, have them pay that upon submittal. If there's a balance due, they could pay that with the pickup of the building permit. And we're going to sort out how the building permit fees get dealt with as its own sort of separate animal, because it seems to be kind of confusing.
and then, so part of it is whatever you folks want to work out with advisory, because we answer to them, so, because the money doesn't come directly to us anyway. So I think we'd be okay with that, but we just wanted to know, because they certainly have opinions about
Sure.
the revenue for the
And so
town.
that sort of plays into the next piece of it, which is what is getting Board of Health review and what isn't. You know, certain permits don't go through the whole process, roofing, siding, windows, things like that, clearly have no impact upon the Board of Health. So those get skipped right directly to my desk. In general, it's Jeannie and Diane taking the permits in, and they'll make a call on those permit tracking forms for whether or not it's something they feel Board of Health is applicable. Certainly, sometimes it's a questionable thing, like opening a wall that's already a 6-foot opening and turning into a 10-foot opening. Do we need a Board of Health review on that or not? I tend to err on the side of caution. And I've been sending a few things that they check off the not required box. I'll send it upstairs. I don't know how much you want to be seeing some of these ones.
Right, I guess the only example I can think of off the top of my head recently was a foundation permit, but I don't know if that's because the foundation permit didn't come into the town hall in general on time, because we were learning about the foundation after it was already
Do you know
in.
which one this was? Was this Mason Hill by any
Yes.
chance?
Yes.
Yeah, that was.
That's right, Mason.
So
And
that
the
was
reason,
one
I'll
where
just explain for anyone who may be
Yeah.
listening and curious, a foundation is important because if it's built on top of the septic or too close to the septic or over lines
Mm-hmm.
or tanks or something like that. So it seems like it doesn't have a septic component, but it does.
Right.
So,
So that specific permit was phase 2 of a 3-phase project, where phase 1 was the riding arena, phase 2 is the barn that connects the riding arena to an existing stable, and phase 3 is the stable itself getting reworked. The contractor and owner believed that the previous building inspector had issued a permit for the riding arena plus the barn foundation, and had then constructed both of those things on the riding arena permit. After I went and reviewed what was in my file, it was determined that the foundation permit had not been issued for the riding arena. So we did an after-the-fact
okay.
permit for that. And I think I talked to Mark kind of extensively about whether this had gone before the board, and there was some notes from meetings many, many months ago that the board had at least approved of the foundation for that piece of the puzzle a long time back. I know this is complicated because there was outstanding issues with the pool.
Right.
Anyway, it's quite a quagmire of a project. So that's the short version is we wanted to get the paperwork to match up with real life. So that sort of skipped the whole
Okay, so that,
regular process that we would normally have gone through because the thing was already in the ground. And, I said, we don't want anybody to get sued for building stuff that was like not permitted.
yeah, okay.
Anyway,
All right, so are there any other things that have come up that, in terms of flow, just to make things easier, coordinating?
No, I think when they come upstairs, you bring them and put them on the desk, which makes it very easy for Jean to log in. We know when something new has come in.
So I'm still a little confused. Are they paying the Board of Health modest fee after the permit's been reviewed or before? It's
currently they're paying it after.
And is that what you're proposing to keep it
What
that
I'm
way?
proposing to
change
do
it?
is to make the Board of Health get their fee up front
Okay.
at the date of submittal, which helps separate out the,
So when they submit it for our review, they're going to pay the fee then? And so it's not contingent upon approval or any decision, it's just us reviewing the permit?
correct,
Okay.
yeah, which I
That
think,
makes sense.
I think is clearer
I-
than the
I-
way we're doing it now.
Right.
Totally agree with that.
And I have my own fee collecting problems that I'll have to sort out, but at least then the two of us are separately doing it. Now, just one thing that's sort of a side note that is related to this whole question that you guys should at least be aware of. The 9th edition of the building code came out as of January 1st, and they've changed some language in it, which I have sort of big problems with. So I will express this to you just now while I have an opportunity. Previously, the building code said no permit shall be issued until a approved wastewater system has been designed and is either in place or has an approved Board of Health design. Similarly, it says no building permit shall be issued until a potable water supply has been provided or a, approved design is in place. That language has been removed from the building code.
Ooh.
I'm not sure what to make of that. But if push comes to shove and somebody comes to me and says I need to be issued a building permit and I don't have an approved septic design, legally I'm supposed to issue them a building permit.
But they may, I mean, it certainly would probably be in their best interest generally to submit a septic design, because you
Correct.
Say,
Oh, absolutely. And that, so I think this goes totally against common sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see permits issued for buildings that can't have an approved system. It would be insane to
Right.
do that. So,
But you could also then say,
Maybe
like,
the
if
town-
somebody
maybe
built
the
the
town
system
What
and
about
said, I've
bylaws?
got a
Yeah.
$500,000 house, it's now a manifest injustice to not be able to put in my septic system.
right, this is a whole legal
Yeah.
nightmare.
We
I'm
need
not
to
sure
have
what the
a
state was
bylaw.
thinking when they did this, but I just wanted you to be aware that this deletion within the building code that previously had a very strong connection to the health codes
Well,
that is no longer there
sequencing,
anymore.
yeah.
And anyway, it's we're all sort of scratching our heads in the building inspector world trying to figure out what to make of this. But for the moment, I'm gonna continue doing everything as we've been doing here. I don't have any other way to link the building permit necessarily to the health.
Does-
We have the
Does
authority-
Sherborn not have anything existing in our town regulations that describe this process?
I don't know.
There's mention of building permit applications within the health regulations, but those wouldn't be mine to enforce. So it's kind of this funny gray area where, the health regulation mentions it, but I don't think I would be beholden to that. It's not my purview to enforce that. So,
Maybe we need a one-line bylaw.
But I don't know that, I think we could make whatever bylaw we wanted, it still wouldn't be your governance.
no, if it was part of
Yeah.
the zoning bylaw, maybe,
Yeah.
Right.
then it would be something that I actually enforce and I could do something with
Any
it.
residentially zoned?
But yeah, again, if anybody has any brilliant ideas how to solve that one.
Because when it comes to certificate of occupancy.
Right.
You wouldn't even be able to issue.
Right.
Well,
Without
that-
something
but-
appropriate, and
Right,
then
but then-
as
but
you
then somebody
pointed
will
out.
say, I
Right.
built
Right.
this whole house, and why
Exactly.
won't you just do
Right.
it?
Yeah.
It
Right.
breaks Title V.
Right, and I can write at your own risk as much as I would like
Yeah.
Right.
on the permit, and it doesn't really.
Well, we have in our regulations, in section 1.1 of our well regulations, that in order to enforce the provisions of Article 11, the State Sanitary Code Regulation 4, water supply, a permit from the Board of Health shall be required for the development of a suitable source of water supply prior to the start of any construction on a building or buildings intended for human occupancy where water will be used. So now, the building code, if that is the case, has contradicted our local code.
Right, the building code just says you need a water supply, and that's it, does not need to be potable.
But
Well,
wouldn't a more stringent regulation prevail? I mean, that's how it works with everything else.
Right, it's not my thing to enforce, so this is where
Right.
this
You're just saying
becomes a
this would be
thing.
an issue, I'd love for you guys to know about it. 'cause
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
It has to be a town-wide thing.
right, and so if I run into a situation where somebody is demanding a building permit, and, the lawyers come a call on it, and the permit has to go out the door, you may have to enforce some sort of stop, cease and desist type thing, saying, you don't meet the local regulations.
What I would
for-
recommend is, before we get there, have our legal counsel review the contradictory bylaw, our
counsel.
regulation
Right, 'cause
and
that's
the
referring
contradiction
to
now
the
with the new
building
ninth
code.
code.
Right.
I think it deserves a legal review to make sure that
definitely.
we don't get to there,
Yep.
know,
Yep.
Right.
maybe
It's not good
preventive.
for anybody,
Yeah.
really.
So I'd recommend maybe legal counsel, if we can, review our law, our regulation, and the new ninth edition of the building code to see how do we handle it.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're also pushing to change that language back. It may take a little while.
Okay, on the inspectors.
Yeah, we've already,
collective side.
we've already said this doesn't make any sense to have removed that language, so. Anyway, take that for what it is, but it's just another sort of hiccup in the way that permitting goes. Yeah, otherwise, I'm hoping that everything is running along. Ellen, are you happy receiving what you're getting?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
Okay.
So,
So if we had a bylaw that was one line that covered this discrepancy for our own interest because we have private wells. And those are not protected under the Fresh Drinking Water Act or none of the national laws protect private water supply. So we have no protection, especially in like 40Bs for a bigger project. There's no protection for underrepresented population at all. So if we were to establish a bylaw, you, as the building inspector, would not be required to enforce the bylaw?
If the bylaw named me as the enforcing agent, then I could enforce it. But if it was like part of the health regulations, then I can't enforce it.
So that's why we
Okay.
need either a town level.
And
or
also-
zoning.
We cover it in two areas. It's actually in the beginning of our section 1, which is also 1.1, required permits. It says, construction under a building permit or foundation permit shall not proceed until the Board of Health permits for water supply and subsurface sewage disposal have been issued. So we're contradicting the 9th code, it sounds like,
Right.
So
building
it sounds-
code.
So just to kind of summarize, it sounds like one piece from the board is we think
This is a
the
regulation.
the current Board of Health regulations that reference the water supply and the building permit process, we'd like town council to look at and opine on, here's the level of discordance between these. If we identify that this creates new gaps in the setting of the new building code that we worry poses a risk for a building project being legally kind of movable while still posing substantial risks that will be presented with an after-the-fact application for the sewage and water for that property, that will pose problems. And so that could be addressed by a zoning board regulation or a Board of Health regulation that listed the building inspector as an agent. My 2 cents I would love to see that come through zoning board, because I think I think we can say it, but to avoid any ambiguity.
Yeah, I mean,
and to have
even a general
separate-
bylaw
Right.
that
Yeah.
just specifically says,
And it's authorizing you
Okay.
to
To
enforce
sort of
the
identify
the
that and
regulation.
say,
Yeah.
we think that the risks outweigh the benefits of this and would would kind of recommend this, and that would then give you the enforcement that you had prior to January 1.
exactly,
kind of-
to say, we're going to push pause on the building permit until you have an approved design.
Okay.
Yep.
So just for procedure, if it's best for this to be through the zoning board,
Is it
I don't
best?
know,
I
maybe our
don't know.
legal
I have
counsel
no
is the
idea
one
where
that
the best place.
that
Just
answers this
let's have legal
question.
counsel
Yeah.
look at it, and
Yeah.
then they can
Yeah,
guide
the
where
question
I'm
it's
wondering
best
if they
handled.
could take
Can
the
we do it
language we
jointly?
have.
Can we do it jointly? Can we give it, can we collaborate so that we're working together on it? That sort of thing. Because I don't want to, first of all, we're representing the individual people's interests. But also, you've expressed a concern, and so it's going to help you because you'll have some support. And it will help us because we're working together with the other boards. But the question is, what's the most efficient way to do it, or the most effective way to do it?
And that sounds like that's a question then for
That's
town
legal counsel, yeah.
Okay, that sounds good.
Assuming that zoning and selectmen and anybody else are,
And if they disagree, then we say, this is one of the issues that will come up, and then we just kind of work with the new regulations and do what we have to when the issue inevitably arises.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
in the 9th code, we've heard on a certain building application mentioned previously that they had a rush because they had to get things done before the 9th code was, or the new building code is the way they worded it.
Yep.
What are they rushing to try to beat? Do you know what they were trying to rush? If you don't mind me asking through you to
But it was more
Chris.
lead stuff.
What I would just say, I think we have a robust agenda tonight.
Yeah.
And I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
could
I
be
mean, we
a
don't have
list.
to go down that road.
like
There are
that-
some,
That water's under that bridge.
It's
and I-
kind of moot at this
Yeah.
point,
Okay,
thankfully.
I was just curious.
No, no
if there
worries.
was
You
I
missed
just-
some fun
I
meetings.
just see lots of
Okay.
bullets.
I read the minutes, but I
Yeah.
was
yeah.
curious.
Rather
The
not
short
be
version is there are differences between the codes. And I believe the one you're talking about was going to basically be one building where one piece would be built to one standard and the other one would be built to the other
Oh,
standard.
okay.
They didn't want to have to mix and match.
Yeah.
That was the reasoning behind their
Sense.
application.
It had been identified.
That was
okay.
quick.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Good. And thanks so
Yeah,
much for
we
bringing
don't
that
wanna-
puzzling new piece of
Yes, the
information.
great big landmine we can all try to not step on.
Yes,
Thank you all.
thank you.
Check it out. Ninth code.
Let's see. All right, so we have 6 minutes. I'll take the Agent Mass Coop project with BU student interns, number 4, under Chair's business. So just to explain what that is, there's someone in town who had approached the board because they were concerned about problems with their water. And they did some testing, and it didn't test well. I don't know all of the details. We dispatched Agent Masscoop to go and investigate, partly because the homeowner also felt that they thought they might be tied into Framingham water via the prison, was what their understanding was about their house, and they're relatively new in town. So Agent Masscoop went to investigate. He used to work with Framingham, thought it might be easier for him to perhaps find records or where to get that information. It was not easy. No one seems to have a ready answer on this. And it's time-consuming. But in any case, Ethan Masscoop teaches at BU and in the public health arena, I believe, and the students do projects. I can't recall if they're grad students. I think they are. They take different kinds of projects, and he has a group who's interested in this topic. So we can have some students do the legwork to try to find out from the prison, from Framingham, somehow, who is the water truly coming from them? Where did they get it from? Are they testing? Apparently, the neighbor to this particular resident is also having issues with their water, and they think they're also on the same kind of water supply. So it's an opportunity just to get this researched and taken care of, because it seems elusive at the moment.
So they think that they are not served by a private well? They think that they're tied into Framingham Town Water?
And I think they had contacted originally thinking they should put in new wells, or maybe it was tied to General Chemical. I don't know. There's some,
That
it
would-
came up in a peculiar
Yeah.
manner, but in any case,
Does it cost us anything?
no. I mean,
So far, it sounds good.
It's
Yes.
research.
Doesn't cost us anything. Ethan will, of course, be overseeing their work. So there is time, because he would be doing it anyway, but in a way, it's a net savings for us, because they get great real-world experience, and we get them,
Information.
yeah.
And this is all with the homeowners seeking the data. So this is not Board of
Yes.
Health kind of going in.
They're
This is
very
saying-
concerned. They have young children.
And they
The
Do we
know
water
what's-
is not in good quality.
in
They
their
spent
well?
a lot of money on a filtering system for the house, so they're not too
Do you
happy
know
right
what,
now.
is it inorganics or organics? Do we know, or?
I wish I remembered, but I do not, so I won't venture a guess. And it's also affecting the color, not that that's.
Aesthetics.
But that's,
Yeah, taste.
yes and no, because it seems to be reflecting the
Chemically.
composition as well,
Mm,
so.
That sounds like inorganics to me.
So that's what that's about. Oh,
Sounds good.
okay, so, and at some point, maybe those students will write up some nice reports, so then all those other
And they can
questions you just
present it.
asked, yes. they
At a
can come in.
Board of Health meeting.
All right, so Lisa, you want to do the, since you're here, I assume to hear monitoring study, although it did say there's
Sounding.
no presentation tonight. Did you know that?
Right, but I thought.
Mr. Horsley.
There would, I mean,
Do I get to have
Something's
that?
better than nothing.
Sure, in the world, there's not a lot to say, I'm really sorry, but better that we take this now, so you're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
sitting here
So,
in anticipation.
we, Daryl and I had a call with the consultant about a couple weeks ago, because we were hoping that we would be having a presentation at this meeting, which was supposed to be last week. And so he shared with us his draft, and it didn't really address several of the key issues that we know people like you and others have expressed explicit information in, such as, you know, is there data that looks at having indigenous soils of a certain thickness versus mounding where, you know, other soils are brought in to increase the thickness, looking at different types of system design, and looking at, you know, the effectiveness and the reduction of viruses and the cleansing of the septic, the nitrate levels, et cetera. So it had some of that buried in the text, but it wasn't really hitting it crisply and clearly in the fashion that we thought it was very important to provide. So Daryl and I went through with him and said, here are, like the 5 or 6 key bullets that we want this to address. We're hoping that you're going to find some additional sources. I provided another article. Daryl had provided some articles. We sort of coached him about what we wanted this to look like, not what the answers are, but just the kinds of information we would like for him to provide, and he seemed very receptive to it, and that we're hoping that it's going to be presentable at one of the March meetings. So we will keep you posted on that. I can't recollect what
Actually, the other thing, as we expressed our concerns, he actually had a lot more information, but
head.
it wasn't yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in his head.
Yeah.
Still,
Yeah.
we're like, no, these are the things
Yeah.
that we need in the
Right.
presentation as well. So the good news was that there was more. It just wasn't ready for showing, and frankly,
Prime time.
it wouldn't have worked out anyway because of the snow night. But what was the other thing? I don't know, it just flew out of my head. But
What is the task that he is being given?
he was given the task of looking at,
like a literature review.
seeing what other alternative mounting system designs were out there to address some of the shortcomings of standard mounting system designs. So we've discussed before the example of, I don't know how to say his name, Huffelder, Dr. Huffelder, I'm messing that up, who's down on Cape Cod and has been working on an alternative mounting system, and he's added, they're calling it the layer cake design with the layer of wood chips, and it seems to really improve performance on a lot of levels. What the Cape Cod group is working on now is how to get that approved by DEP, because it varies from the DEP specifications for mounting, even though it's an improvement. So he's trying to go through the process of certification, maybe a test period certification kind of thing. So,
Sorry, what did,
The
It's
piloting process.
Piloting process. That's usually how they start. They do a piloting.
And then it becomes an approved alternative.
innovative alternative
Innovative
technology.
alternative, right.
So that's, the good news is there's somebody who's already working on that, and to get it also through the approval process.
because that all makes perfect sense. It makes me want to go do some more work to try to figure out why is it that South Dartmouth, for instance, is considering requiring these in the town, these within a certain distance to, wetlands or anything that eventually runs into Buzzards Bay. So they don't, they think that they're here. They don't think that they're there. So I need to figure out
Why they're requiring mounted systems?
Yeah, well, exactly, the layer approach, because, of course, the nitrogen loading is a big worry down there, again, because of the pollution of Buzzards Bay. They've seen what's happening in the Cape. And so, they're fairly far along the process. And I'm sort of now at the stage where I'm talking at the top of my hat because I don't know enough, but I was surprised that how far this seems to be and how close that seems to be. So I've got to figure out why.
So I do know for Cape Cod, there's a commission for Cape Cod. Cape Cod Commission might be the name, and it's a regional planning group to address issues particular to Cape Cod, and Cape Cod is the poster child for groundwater problems. Sandy soils, odd patterns of use, lots of development,
Sole
lots
source
of reasons.
aquifer.
Yep, and
Sole source aquifer. Everybody gets their water
Yeah.
from the aquifer.
But I think
hold
you're-
on,
oh, yeah.
just,
Sure.
I have the answer, sort of, maybe the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
So, the Cape is in violation of the Federal Clean Water Act for nitrogen. So it's a big problem. So this commission has kind of special authority because of the nature of the problem down there to enact regulations that we can't enact. So they have now restrictions on fertilizer use. And I'm just guessing that it might extend to using other technologies to try to improve that extraordinarily serious situation because they are already in violation, whereas we are prevented from regulating fertilizer or pesticide use as a Board of Health. Because if people are using it according to manufacturer's specifications, it's their right
exempt,
to do
right.
so. So that's, for example, a regulation that we just couldn't do here without a Clean Water Act violation, which I think we'd rather not have in order to get that. So, so I just think it's the setting. I'm not positive, but that's what I'm guessing it
Sure
is,
makes sense.
the extremity of their situation.
So we should probably touch base with him again
Yeah,
shortly.
yeah.
And so
It's
that'd
been
be
about
the,
2
like the
weeks, I
March
think.
7th or March 21st meetings are kind of the timeline we are
Yeah, and
optimistic about.
I'm not
Are they
here
optimistic?
the
Yes.
21st. You know that. I'm not here the 21st, so.
21st, oh, so that would be not good.
I'm not
One
here
of our-
March 7th, just so you know.
Yeah, and one of our agenda meetings is that I'm asking to move one of the meetings
So
as
maybe
well,
we
because
can
I
move
don't want to
things
miss a
around
meeting.
later.
All right, so we're going to try and figure out how to get him here in March, but at the most productive time possible, which maybe, I'll just throw it out as a possibility, we have a meeting where we only have him presenting.
I think that
Like
makes
a
a lot of
special
sense, 'cause I
meeting?
think there's a lot of
Yes.
people who
On a
have-
different day.
Yeah.
Questions?
That's what we're
And
saying.
that way we can
Yeah.
get everybody in and
Yeah.
everybody hearing
Can
it
I
at
provide
once.
blackout
and-
dates?
Yes, we'll work on that. We won't do
Later.
that this
Yeah.
second.
Like the frequent flyer ticket.
We'll take that
I'm
offline.
out of town, but,
Exactly, yeah.
You know, I'll obviously have
Yeah.
legal representation and
Sure.
and engineering representation.
Okay,
Sounds great.
all right.
Thank you.
And we'll
Absolutely.
try to get it videoed, too.
Yeah.
That'd be another way, remote
Yeah,
participation.
I mean, it's, again, you don't need to hear this because it's obvious, but, you know, we're approaching the 2-year anniversary when this whole process started. And just so, you know, from my perspective, any signs that we're actually having movement is very heartening.
And, but I want to make sure that you also keep in mind that even though, like, on the construction end, it's really frustrating, but also because you're still living on one of the area sites.
Not any longer.
No, but I was gonna say, it's also benefiting you at the same time because of your own septic system. But I guess you're no longer living there, so never mind.
No, we, the property's sold, and we have some lovely new owners, so I think they're gonna be a big asset to the town, so.
Good.
And, I drove past there tonight, and a lot of construction underway, so.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Hopefully
they're
you
great
guys
people.
know.
I don't know about it.
Good.
thank you. And you had a
You
question?
mentioned South Dartmouth, you mean the Paden area?
Well, just the whole town, because Dartmouth legally, Paden is just sort of a construct.
Yes, a
but
section.
Yeah, it would be,
Have you spoken to the health director there, Chris Michaud?
I have not, no.
You should talk to him because he's a great asset to the town and is very smart and he'll help you as much as he can.
That's true. Yeah, I've been amazed with the town so far in terms of when I go and look for something, it's boom, there, it's a very well run place. Just getting permits pulled, I couldn't believe the experience. You obviously, if you're living in a house, you have to have the permit, are there any outstanding permits? I called down there, they said, I'm sorry, we're way too busy, we can't get to this now, but if you can stay on hold for 3 minutes, we'll give you the.
Wow, 3 minutes.
And I was like, wow.
Right, no pressure.
Anyway, thank you. And if I happen to miss it, our engineer from Schofield will come in. And if you could just, when he comes in, I'm sure you recognize Bert, because you've been, just tell him, Bert, it's already done and built for it.
Oh, okay.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
It does save us some time.
Absolutely. You have a good night.
I'm sorry, the gentleman's name again was?
Chris Michaud, he's the health director in Dartmouth.
Are you here for a
You're
special
welcome.
issue? Yeah.
I just came to.
Sounds
My
good.
name's Robin Stahl. I own the property on 3 Oldfield Drive. I have the septic permit in process, but I didn't come to speak about that.
Oh,
I
okay.
You just wanted to
came
curious and
I
see.
was curious who you all are, how it runs.
What fun we have here.
And I'm interested in
Sounds
good,
good.
good water, good health, stuff, so I just came to see.
Oh, okay.
Sounds good.
All right, well, welcome. All right, well, this one might not be good health
Sitting in my computer because it's turning.
particularly. So, Okay, so we have a discussion now about well water quality issues that have arisen in town.
Yes.
And I'll let you explain if you
Okay.
would like, since you unfortunately know better than anybody.
Let me just get my little bag here. My name is Artis Flavel. Artis Flavel, I live at 32 Maple Street. I have lived at 32 Maple Street since 1993. When I moved in to my house, we tested the water, and it was perfect. Moving out from Cambridge, the center of Inman Square, so we thought having perfect water was really heavenly. And I've really never stopped thinking that.
Can you move the microscope, the microphone closer to your?
Yeah.
Closer, yeah.
So, so we moved out from the center of Inman Square, moved out to Sherborn. Well water, our well water was perfect. I have our first test here. Everything about it was good. A couple of years later, we had another water test in 1995. Everything was great. We haven't had a water test since then until November of last year. My water started to taste bad. It started to taste odd and kind of metallic-y. I couldn't tell, is it metal, is it chemical, what is going on? And it wasn't pleasant, but I thought maybe it's the old pipes, something's different, couldn't figure it out. And then it got worse, and my daughter was visiting at one point, and she's kind of got a sensitive stomach, it's true, but she got up in the morning one day and took a drink of water, and immediately it came back up. And she said, this water really tastes bad, Mom. It's really and I had said I thought it was maybe just that faucet because of but now it was this way all over the house. So we decided to have the water tested. And I'm going to just back up a little bit to say that in the summertime, Ben Stevens, Trask Development, began to build on the lots on Green Lane, which I'm sure you're well aware of, but just to recap, he had put in, and everybody here would know this better than I, so if I misspeak, forgive me, but he had originally put in for, I believe it was 18 units on those 2, 4, 6, 12 acres of land across from the orchard on Green Lane. And things transpired, and I don't know what happened, but he ended up having 4 single-family homes being built now, 2 acres, 2 acres, 2 acres, and 6 acres right in back of me. If anybody's familiar with where I live, I'm right on Maple Street. I'm the Brown house. It's just one property over from the corner of Green Lane. So my property previously backed up to that 12 acres, which went just straight back to from my house to the first house, well, on the other side of the orchard. So construction began. I came home actually from visiting a sick relative, and the woods in back of me had been really leveled to a distance of, I would estimate, there's probably about a 75-foot buffer between my property line and where the trees were downed. Shortly after that, they began digging, and then they began pulverizing rock with a big giant machine that goes, and that went on for about 6 weeks. I know that I think that we have a no blasting policy here in Sherborn, and I'm not quite sure why that is. And I'm not advocating for it, but I will tell you that having rock pulverized adjacent to your property, or actually anywhere in the vicinity, is really unpleasant. And I know that anybody who's experienced what happened at the library knows that. It takes a long time. It's really loud. It shakes the ground. It's not anything you can ignore. but that was just unpleasant. It was part of the development, nothing to do. So I got the water tested, back now to November. I got the water tested, and it came back with very high levels of manganese. DEP's normal level shouldn't be above 0.5. 0.5.
Yes,
0.05.
0.05.
That's correct.
Fi-
0.05?
50 parts per billion,
Okay.
right?
Want to bring
Well,
it down,
they're
it would
putting it
be.
milligrams
per
Because it's
liter.
parts per
Right, that's,
million.
yeah,
Milligrams
it's
per
50
liter.
ppb, so it's point,
They go with
Yeah.
parts per million with manganese for some reason.
for metals, they do, yeah, so.
What-
point of-
what was
So
the
what was your
number?
level?
So mine came in at 2.14.
What was it? I'm sorry.
2.14.
Okay.
Milligrams per liter. Yeah. Do you know, was that taken right from your tap?
That was taken from my kitchen sink, my kitchen tap. Before that, I left something out. I came down one morning and I live in an arts and crafts bungalow. So the downstairs of the house is pretty much all antique, and the upstairs was built out in the 80s before I bought it. The attic converted to be bedrooms. So my upstairs bathroom is more modern than my downstairs. I came down one morning, and I actually have I have all these things assembled on the Google Drive for you to look at whenever you want. I have photos, and I actually have a little video also on there, as well as all my water tests. And if you just search 32 Maple Street water issue, you'll find it. That's what I'm
I think we
told.
can't without having it entered as part of the record.
I'm sorry?
Open
be
meeting
printed.
law.
So we
I need
can't,
to have it
for open
open
meeting
meeting
law, we
law.
can't access things that aren't part of the record for the meeting.
You'd
So
have to
what do
provide
I
it
need to do?
us, Right?
You have to provide a
them.
paper
Can you
copy.
print it and
Provide
hand it
paper
to us?
Or scan it, right? You can
Okay.
scan
Can
it
I,
and send
can
it to
I
Ellen.
send you the link via email? So I was going to do that tonight, but I didn't have anyone's official
The
email.
other thing is, I have no idea how we could project here, but since they do a lot of projections at selectmen's meeting and planning board.
That's what I had actually been
And then it
hoping.
would be captured
Yeah, I
on
mean, there's
video.
it's right there. I just don't,
Yeah, I don't know how, Rick, so do you know how that might,
Just
well,
in general, if there
would
was
it-
something to be. Yeah.
oh.
I mean, I think we have a
is
rich
it
agenda.
possible?
It sounds like it takes more time than a 5-minute.
Well, I have to see what she has
Yeah.
on the computer, I gotta find out, I got the connection for it,
Oh, okay,
It's
so,
a, it's a
all right.
MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
A MacBook Pro is what I have.
yeah, I need to.
Can I just
Can you
ask-
show it to us on the computer?
No, I don't think we can
No,
look out for
we
open
can't-
meeting law
yeah.
on the
Yeah,
computer.
no,
To
I'm only,
obey the
if it
public
can be
meeting.
No, but I
projected
mean,
and
I just
captured by
wanna know
him,
how-
then I think.
No, but we
If she's showing it to us, that's not.
All right,
Can I
you know
just-
what, let's go back to the verbal, and we'll
Yeah.
figure out how we
Okay.
get the visual, which,
Okay.
the old
I can't-
picture's worth 1,000 words, I
Yes.
always think that's
Yes.
helpful, but if we
Well,
can't
and that's
quite-
why I
Enter
put it
into the
together,
record.
because I
It's
agree.
hard copies.
Um,
It goes to-
I can send you each or all, a link if,
I
and
think
which
the
is.
intent is anything we look at,
Yeah.
it should be public record, and anybody in our community should be able to see it. So if you send us links privately, that fails to meet the public.
To send it to Ellen.
So anybody
Ellen.
can search.
Yeah, and find her on YouTube.
Yeah, I've just,
But I think just kind of separate from the question, the part I'm struggling a little bit with is, certainly we wouldn't be able to issue a permit saying that the 32 Maple well is there. I don't see anything in our well regulations that say we can rescind, what can we do in terms of trying to help address it, or even establishing causation, which certainly seems.
Oh, yeah, we're not even there yet.
Yeah,
Matt. You're
we're-
jumping a
I'm
lot
I
of
think
not-
we're
steps.
learning about a water quality issue
Issue,
in
okay.
town that may
Okay.
or
We're
may
not
not
jumping to that
extend
yet.
at some point beyond a
Okay.
property.
but I was just
So.
addressing your comment and saying that this, what I have created is public. Anybody can search it and find it.
We understand that,
Okay.
but it's.
These are all super rational, reasonable
yeah,
things,
yeah.
which has almost nothing to do with the open meeting law. And
Not gonna
Okay.
we just have to make sure we're super duper compliant with that.
Yeah.
And we also have something at 8, so I don't know
Okay.
how.
So, hold on, I don't know why I'm on this desktop.
And did you, Artis, when you talked about that you had your water tested when you first moved in, did you have it tested for all the same analytes? So you had manganese
Yes, I had
tested?
a full test.
Yeah, and so,
Okay, cool. So, how do I get there, though? How do I get my
You ready for
cursor
some
up
fancy
there?
minutes?
My question. Come back.
so is he gonna capture
Oh,
this on his?
Here's another approach we can take is, oh,
She
all
can
right.
present it on the screen.
I can't see this, but I'm doing this up there. Come on.
So can you click the
Oh, here
link?
we go. Oh. Okay.
We need a new bulb, that's why it's green.
Okay. Well, I'll continue while this is going on. So I came down one morning in early November, and I went into the bathroom, and the tub, I have an old tub, and it's kind of a cream color. My whole bathroom is that color. And the water had been slowly dripping, and it was brown and foamy. It looked really, really creepy. So that really upset me. And I called a water treatment guy, and so at this point we sent Mr. Stevens that was when I got the water tested. I got the water result back, and then we sent an email to Mr. Stevens. And that was just before, actually, the special town meeting happened up at Pine Hill. And he didn't reply. So, is this what, is the town building on Xfinity, or
I don't think so.
no? I don't know what
Oh,
I'm
and we're
doing.
not Xfinity.
Okay.
I don't know.
We
What's
don't
our
have- people
Wi-Fi
shouldn't have to
through,
click here
Ellen,
to-
do you know?
I don't know that we can announce the Wi-Fi password on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, let's just see what happens here. So anyway, I got prices on a water softener, water treatment, which is essentially similar to a water softening system, and it was about $5,000 to $6,000 was the price that I got. Didn't hear back from Mr. Stevens. It occurred to me, I thought, he has as much reason to deal with me as he has not to deal with me. He's got a lot going on in town. He's got a lot of stuff he wants to do. I had just been at the town meeting. People are concerned about water. There was a woman who was quite vocal about being not part of the development herself, but being in an adjacent property, and what would happen if her water was fouled. And she really didn't get an answer that was, the answer was, it's a civil matter. It'll be up to you. And then everybody voted to go ahead with the project. So, I didn't proceed with the water system at that point because I honestly thought, well, if Mr. Stevens puts one in for me, he can probably do it at half the price. He's a contractor, he's a builder, he does this all the time, and he's probably not going to want to reimburse me for something that's twice the price of what he can put in. So I didn't. Time went on. Recently, I had reason to think, we've now also sent Mr. Stevens another email and gotten a response. I did speak to him at that town meeting too, and I didn't hear from him after that either.
And this is not
In
through
November.
council, just
Oh, this is just-
person to person?
Person to person. So I had reason to think that my water had gotten worse recently because it tasted worse, and if you run the shower, it smells really. It's that metally, chemically smell is really present in the air. And the taste had gotten worse, and the smell had gotten worse. I brought you some samples, which you can try. Here's my water tonight. That's what it looks like out of the tap with a little bit of bleach added, because bleach will turn manganese. Manganese is an iron relative, and so it will oxidize the manganese, in effect rust it, and so it turns color, and you can have a visual on what's in your water. So that's That's what my water looks like tonight with a little bit of bleach. This is water that was, when I had my water tested again, which was a couple of weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago now. I actually rushed the results for the meeting on Wednesday last week, but this has now settled. And if you look at it, you can see that there are tiny particles that are suspended in the water, and there's there's sediment on the bottom, which is the manganese. And if you want to, I can pass it around to you if you like. But so, this is basically this after a week. If you'd like.
I don't know if
I
I'm
don't
going to
drink
drink
bleach.
it.
Well, if you're
especially with
interested
bleach.
in what water that's high in manganese tastes like, seriously, you might
I'm gonna
want
smell
to
it,
just
but
smell
my
it and
plan is
taste
to
it.
smell it.
So,
I don't know.
and I brought some to rinse your mouth afterwards. Anyway,
Madam Chair, if I can, this is it might sound silly, but
Yeah.
since this is an open meeting and evidence is being provided, do we need now to keep
keep
that on
that.
our records?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Do we need to keep
Well, I'm
that
asking,
in the
I don't
office?
know, and I would
What I would
ask.
say is, I think for the I would say, I hear the frustration or concerns. I think those things establish that there's manganese in the water, which has been established by the analytic lab, so I would say it's kind of corollary evidence as opposed to saying.
That's fine. I just didn't know if someone else was watching the meeting, if they wanted to see it after the meeting.
I gotta,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh,
What
Because
is the
that's also, like,
repeat
how it
level of
runs.
manganese
on
in your
camera.
well? What is the repeat level
know,
on
but
your
they may-
well from last
I
week?
don't know. I just,
It's a visual item.
So, Ernest,
visual versus.
Okay.
can you just see if you can see a personal hotspot that says Matt's iPhone and the password is your name?
Did the concentration stay the same, artists, or?
Can you just tell us what the repeat level is of the manganese?
5.58.
So that's
Okay.
over 100 times the drinking water standard.
100.
And it's more than double what it was at the end of November.
So
So while,
this is,
And did any of your neighbors experience the same issue, artists? Have you talked to anyone?
To my knowledge, no, but I haven't spoken to everyone. My across-the-street neighbor has not experienced this. And the neighbor 2 doors to her left, well, yeah, on the other side of Maple Street, so I think it's 42, maybe, the Chistolinis. They have a water treatment system in their house, and so they don't know what their well water is. They don't know whether it's affected their well water or not, because it hasn't affected their indoor water.
And do you know the depth of your well?
140 feet.
140. Because the ledge that they were
Yeah,
hammering was about, what, 15 feet?
yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
there's a
The
big ledge hill in
relative-
back of me. It's always been there. The water does run down back in there
Yeah,
off the
it's moving
property,
like-
through my yard, underneath Maple Street, through the yards across from me, down under the farm, and exits on the other side of 16. There's that swamp there.
So when we first heard about this and we're planning, scheduled you to come in, it made me think of a recent situation with town hall water where the water was brownish for a bit. And there's just been some ledge work, as she mentioned, at the library. So it made me think it's kind of unusual that we had 2 similar sounding events, although I haven't heard anything about the water quality analyses for town hall. So I asked people, one, I tried to read any kind of research that might have been online that talked about impacts on water quality from disruption of soil, disruption of ledge. And there are a few things that do talk about the fact that you're taking something that is a big rock and you're breaking it up into little pieces so that when it does get washed by rainwater, things are more prone to leach out because there's more surface area. So that's been recognized to some degree in the literature. And I also spoke with some water system a water system company that services water systems, and asked if they had ever seen this. And they said that there are some instances where they think that this kind of activity affects water, and they would try to get me a reference to a town that had experienced something like that. So I couldn't find anything crystal clear on this, but it just made me say it might be worthy, maybe we'll get some more student interns who want to research this so that we know, does this kind of activity potentially lead to this sort of impact on water? Something very difficult to prove, how does it link and how is it moving through bedrock fractures and all
And
the
is it
rest, which are.
transient, or is it?
Right.
But I don't agree. I think
So-
it's well known that it's associated with ledge drilling. And medically, there's very well described manganese toxicity. It's very
Oh,
dangerous. and it's very
Manganese is
serious.
I didn't say manganese.
right.
I think as a Board of Health,
Incredibly
she's a private well owner, and we're in a town of 100% private wells. We have to recommend that she not drink her water. This is not safe, because the toxicity is cumulative. It builds up in the liver, and it can cause a progressive neurotoxic condition with extrapyramidal symptoms, and similar to Parkinson's disease, and this is very serious.
Oh, okay, I don't
called-
think anyone was
yeah.
saying that it wasn't.
Right.
It's
I think
more
it depends.
what's within our
Right.
purview,
Like what pieces,
yeah.
so I think nobody disputes the manganese has
Right.
risen. I mean, I think all of it's the same thing, which is I have a 100-fold elevation of my manganese compared to what I had before. I think the question becomes, for the new properties that are issued permits, I don't see anything in the regulations that let us be the adjudicatory body
No.
to say,
No, I'm
this
not.
needs to stop. I think your point is that there's a larger question of saying, we've seen this in 2 properties in Sherborn. That gives pause to say, do we need to have a larger conversation about what does the data say for risk of ledge disruption and manganese?
Yeah.
Which the question of manganese toxicity is separate from, right?
Right.
But I think it sounds like your guidance would say, don't drink water that has 100 times the manganese. I think don't drink brown water, don't drink bleach water, are all pieces of that.
And unfortunately, the hard part too is people shouldn't be showering in water with manganese because the aerosol version being inhaled, they think has
Effects on
a
the
bigger
lung.
effect and creates, as you mentioned, the Parkinson's-like disease that they call manganism. So there is a name for it.
Well, when you look at this, you can believe that because the tiny particles that have not settled would become airborne, one would assume,
Yes.
Um,
And inhaling certain things is worse than drinking.
It actually, yeah, especially with metals, it can be the case.
Really?
Aerosol.
Yikes.
So, but the problem's gonna be, who is gonna finance an alternate supply
So-
of water and,
Unfortunately.
no, I know it's not
Yeah,
us,
yeah.
but.
Right.
So also, in this last water test, I have coliform, which was not present in the first water test and has never, ever been present in my water before, to my knowledge.
If I may, Madam Chair, Otis,
Yes.
who is advising you? Do you have a well driller or a well lab?
I spoke to 2 companies today. I spoke to Bay State and I spoke to Dover Pump.
Okay.
I've spoken to Think Pure Water, and
H2O?
that was the water treatments, when I was
Yeah.
looking into having a water
Yeah,
treatment
That's
system.
what I have.
And have they advised any scoping of your well? To visualize your
Yes,
well?
Mr. Stevens had replied to our second email and said, why don't you have your well flushed and bleached? If
I'm
I
not
bleach-
really interested in Mr. Stevens, he's not a well driller. I'm wondering
Okay,
if the
well,
well
I
driller.
followed up on that because I didn't know.
I
what,
do- I
you
would
know.
suggest, and that's why I brought the question up, I'd suggest you talk to a well
Yeah, I
driller.
did.
They're licensed, they'll get you to the right people to, a lot of times they will send a scope down your
camera.
well, a camera scope,
Yeah.
and see what's going on in the well.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the new way of doing things, but if they haven't advised you, I'd suggest you ask them that question to
Well,
see what
they did advise me today. They actually told me to come talk to you, so.
And I would have told
So
them.
let's talk. So,
That's fine, that's fine.
so, what they said was that, there is clearly some, and I had heard this before also, there's clearly an opening to my well. If there's coliform there, there's some way that there's, a well that's been breached, right? I can try to, I can bleach my well and flush my well, which basically means getting rid of the bacteria. My water will turn this color, but it will be safe to drink in terms of bacteria, but not in terms of manganese. And then I can flush it and I can see what happens. The problem is that there is no way to know, especially since the manganese has more than doubled since the end of November, how long that would or would not, if that did take care of the problem, would it last a day, a week, a month, a year? How long would it last? So that doesn't seem particularly viable. I can send a scope down and I can see if there is a
fracture.
what one guy called a seam, yeah.
It's a
He can
fracture,
find it, yeah.
so, right, if the ledge disruption essentially created a conduit.
Right.
And that could
Yeah.
make it vulnerable to the kinds of impacts
Yeah.
that you're describing.
And also the seal in your well, if
Could
it's
be.
properly sealed to the upper soil, because the overburdened soil from the well that connects, that's the soil above the ledge, that seal is broken, you might be getting bacteria
Going
that way
down.
as well.
Right.
Also, could I ask, so excess iron can lead to growth of certain kind of bacteria that live on iron.
I have that, and I got a
So
system.
could this,
Iron
Could be
reduces
that as
bacteria.
well.
are there types of coliform that could be related to a mineral as opposed to,
Well, they will
An
find that out
organic
as they
source?
continue to,
Okay.
I don't know if they have
Well-
a specific test
it might-
for the
well,
bacteria.
This is
Might be
what,
related.
so
Everything could be interesting.
the well, one of the well guys asked me if there was a reading on the coliform, and neither of the tests, any of the tests that I've
Just said
seen.
detected?
Yeah, it just says detected, there's no level on it, but apparently you can get that? I don't know where or how.
They have that
Exactly.
information, so if they identified it, they know. what that is.
Actually, not the last one.
What
The one that
lab?
detected it said, no, we don't have the levels, we just see if it's there or if it's not there. So I would have to have it retested, and I would have to know where to go to do that. He said also that if there had been hydrofracking when they drilled the well, which also happened right in back of me, and I've got pictures of that, I would estimate that's 80 to 100 feet from my well, their well. And when, I don't know if they hydrofracked, but he said that you would know.
Who
I
would it be?
I don't think any of the issued permits had something in that proximity.
Yeah, no, that's too close
Okay.
for our
But
regulations.
so I think we have two issues, and just in the interest of time, I think we're several minutes in.
no, right.
So I think there's a larger question of manganese in the town of Sherborn, which sounds like is an open question that feels like in the purview of Board of Health to try and explore, figure out, and address. I think for the kind of particulars of your property, it sounds like there aren't steps, like there's sort of advice that can be offered by Mark or others in an informal capacity, but there aren't sort of remediation steps that we have. Would that then be civil litigation or continued engagement with the abutter in terms of adjudicating the cause and effect and kind of getting legal recourse or compensated
Section.
water pieces? I think is sort of out of scope for us for this. Is that, am I sort of thinking about it the right way?
I
Well,
do
so-
believe that we don't have.
So I actually reached out to DEP.
I did also.
And they, I mean, it's true that legally, the laws that protect drinking water only apply to public water supply. So you're not protected by law. And that's why it's a civil matter. However, one of the board members of the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards feels that it's our obligation to help artists because she has no law protecting her water.
But we don't have any regulation providing.
Yeah, so
Well,
I don't know what,
so-
so I don't know what we can do,
Well, this is,
Civil matter.
because,
And it's
think it's a
also a
civil
health
matter.
advisory, it's
Yeah.
not even a drinking water standard for manganese,
Right.
it's a guideline, so it gets even, which is, that doesn't mean that it's okay, and we're not saying it
Yeah.
is, but it gets even stickier from a legislation standpoint, because it's not a maximum contaminant level, it's a health advisory and health guideline, so, which is neither here nor there unless you're in a lawsuit. But I do think that, this is something that we should evaluate in terms of, for ledge disruptions that are happening as part of construction, what are the protocols and what kind of, baseline sampling should be done to ensure that this doesn't happen again. That doesn't help you in this particular situation right now, but it's something that we can certainly think about.
And
well, I
especially
may end
as
up
we're
being in front of you again, because what I'm being told is that, what all this is leading to, as far as I can see, is that the most likely thing is that I'm gonna have to re-drill, I'm gonna have to drill a new well. Now,
Maybe.
this is just.
So many variables.
This is just
so many-
off the cuff, okay, because I don't know, because I haven't looked at the maps, and I learned this today. But there's new construction next to me on the Stewart's, number 40 Maple Street, on the Stewart's old property, which, you know, there was no ledge disruption or anything there, but they did expand their septic field. I believe it's right on the other side of my wall, of the wall that separates our property, with whatever the setback is. I now have the property and the well on the other side of the back wall. I have I have the house that was somehow approved to be built on the 0.4 acres on the other side of me that has a well and a septic there. I'm not sure where I would move my well. I'm not sure where I would be able to move my well.
I don't think we can opine on that without the abutters being here.
No, well, you would have
No,
to.
it's a hydrogeological
It's a-
question.
no.
Yeah.
An
Yeah.
engineer would
No,
decide.
it has to do with the regulations. It
Right,
has to do
but-
with the setbacks of where I would put a well, and I'm just saying to you that there's a very good likelihood that I can't actually move my well very far in any direction.
But then you'd need a variance, and we need to have the abutters notified, because just as you'd want to be notified about the Green Street properties, if your well were moving and could be sort of limiting their pieces.
But we're not there yet.
Right.
Yeah. So the well that I do have, I may be able to drill down deeper, but it's again, it's iffy. They're telling me it's iffy. It's not a sure thing.
And
Right,
if you had
and
a
I,
fracture, you would actively not want to do that, because you'd just be pulling.
But we don't know that. I mean, it could be the seal, like Mark was saying, like, so it could either be coming from above, in which case it wouldn't necessarily require installation of a new well, or it could have been that there's now new fractures that might necessitate that,
and
so.
moving elsewhere on the property might not solve it. So none of that sounds
Right.
very encouraging. So, right, there is a bigger issue of if this is going to be happening more frequently,
Right.
since historically, properties with ledge did not get developed, and now
Right.
they are being developed, so are you, unfortunately, the canary. The other thing is, if you could contact the MAHB and have them, whoever you spoke to, write us something about what they think we could do, since
Yeah.
they are the experts on, I mean, MAHB is Massachusetts Association of Health Boards, so they deal with boards of health across the state. If they could put something down and guide us on what they think is possible or steps we should take, that would be great.
And I can call people at DP Drinking Water Supply, even though we're not regulated by the state, they might also have some insights into this.
That'd be
that I
great.
could reach out
I
to.
also called the DEP, and I also spoke to several people. And what they said to me was, what you have said, that the DEP regulations are based on, are state regulations that are based on the Federal Water Act.
Right.
And that concerns public water supply.
Right.
Therefore, their regulations don't cover public water supply, and that means that it would fall to the towns. So it, in fact, would fall to you guys to have
Well,
regulations
You'd say
that
your
would,
water's undrinkable.
that would cover
Like, we
me.
wouldn't approve your well
That's-
as a new well, so that's our purview, is we'd say,
Yeah.
if your well was fresh drilled and did this,
Yeah.
we'd say that is not a permissible water supply, so it's not that it's unregulated, it's it changes to your existing well that may or may not be caused by an abutter, but certain, in timing, would seem to be potentially related.
Mm-hmm.
That is sort of out of our purview, so I think we do have manganese regulations which say it needs to be 0.05
For new wells.
for new wells.
Right.
But we don't have a way to condemn your well.
Right.
We would certainly encourage you not to drink from it, nor do we have a mechanism to determine causation or compensation.
Right.
And those pieces, I think, are the sort of outside.
Right,
questions.
because unfortunately, we're not supplying water, so it's not like we
Well, I
can
understand.
provide with
You
an
don't have to
alternate
explain it to
supply.
me. I understand. I'm sitting here in front of you underlining the fact that I believe that the town of Sherborn Board of Health now has an additional responsibility to develop some regulations that do protect people like me, particularly if you are issuing variances so that developers can put in properties where there is ledge or not ledge or whatever. You know, and I hearken back to that special town meeting where the question came up about what would happen if the water supply was People were worried about what would happen if something happened to the water supply, because the town of Sherborn would then, once the property was sold and so on and so forth, the town of Sherborn would be responsible and blah, blah, blah. Another woman stood up and said, what about me? I am not in this property. It's not my concern necessarily what happens to the public water supply for that development. I'm concerned about my well, what happens to me. And there was no answer for her, and I'm like her.
Right, well, I mean,
So-
that was a 40B. I don't want to mix necessarily some of the issues that were at the town meeting, which are different, even though.
But not a lot. What was in back of me started out as a 40B.
The concerns are similar.
It was
I
a
just wanna be
40B.
cognizant of
In
time. We're
back of me
45
was a
minutes into
40B,
this.
and it got changed.
Well,
think
back
we
Right,
to
need
so it's
private.
not a 40B.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a
But I-
private development.
Yeah,
Right.
but I think we need to address this.
But I would be in the
think
same position regardless.
Right.
Whether he had gone through with the 40B,
Right.
or whether there were the 4 pieces of property that's now developing now, doesn't matter in terms of what has happened to me.
Okay.
Agreed.
So we have an appointment at 8. If you
Sorry.
want to stay in, we could pick up on it and just wrap it up, because I think even wrapping up is going
Yeah.
to take longer than 2 minutes or
Right.
something. So if you don't mind,
No, no,
if we could
not at
address
all.
their issue, and then we'll come back to this. And unfortunately, what we're dealing with is a long-standing issue of proving cause and effect in the
No, I know,
environmental
and I don't
realm.
mean to be heated about it.
So,
No,
It's
not at all.
rather
I
upsetting.
think your behavior is entirely appropriate and understandable.
Yes, and I think it's important that we're aware of this kind of thing and see if there's anything that we can do to figure this out, because it shouldn't happen. And can we do anything to prevent that from happening?
Thank you.
So, okay, so apologies to Jeff and Diane Wilson, are you? Just Jeff. Oh, okay. And so we have a discussion of a building application for 27 Deerfield.
Yes. Yeah, our minutes reflected our review of this. If the board wants to know, we met, Madam Chair, on November 1st and reviewed it. And then further information came in, the floor plans, and it was a matter of room count. It's a 5-bedroom septic design on file. And then we looked at it with the addition, and the room count already exceeds what a 5-bedroom room count would be, and that's up to 11 rooms. That's the addition. So you also have minutes, if you have, look at your packet from October 18th, 2017. So the applicant, I think, wants to review
This is this.
yes, the floor design maybe, I'm not for sure. I know they're here to discuss it, so that's the status at hand. The last meeting we had was the meeting of November 1st, and the board reviewed it. I can read it, it's only 2 sentences. It was noted that an existing condition floor plan was dropped off to Board of Health office today, but it differs from an existing conditions floor plan provided on October 18, 2017. The agent previously rejected the building application on 10/18/17 due to room count. The applicant will need to present any further discussion of this application if requested. So that's why I believe the applicant's here.
Okay. All right. So,
This is the October.
So the original one that was dropped off on 10/18, that was the floor plan when we purchased the house in October of 2014, or June of 2014 or so, which, when we purchased the house, the basement was already finished. Due to subpar conditions, we ripped out the carpet, tore down the ceiling, took down the drywall in the basement, and at this point, we just want to, if you look at the floor, the lower level on the basement kind of has 2 areas. It has the main area at the base of the stairs, and then it kind of wraps around to the other part of the house. We only want to finish that main area, or refinish it from what it was when we purchased the house.
So, can you just tell us which drawing you're
Can we have
referencing?
So
Is
the
that
one I
live?
have says
Can we come up
27
and just
Deerfield
point?
Road, Sherborn, Massachusetts, at the top.
Actually,
This
Come
one?
up and just point.
yeah, we'll,
Yeah.
turn this a little.
He's in this one.
this is the one, this was the floor plan when we purchased the house.
Yeah,
Okay, so that
This
is
one.
I
the
think we can.
Right?
October 18th.
right?
Yeah, October 18th.
The other one.
This one.
That, yes, this was the floor plan when we purchased the house.
So only one small little part was unfinished?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And was that permitted, the prior finishing of the basement was permitted, unpermitted, we don't know?
I'd have
Maybe
to
that's the
check that.
problem.
It
Okay.
most likely wasn't. I have no idea a full review.
Based on what you're
but-
describing, doesn't sound super.
Well, you know,
We
it
would've
was,
caught it.
it was finished well. It was just used and outdated. So it wasn't a,
You don't think it was a sort of homeowner?
it very well could have been finished by the homeowner unpermitted. I wouldn't deny that, if that wouldn't surprise me, if that was the case. But, I mean, essentially, that's, you know, it was a finished basement when we bought the house.
Yeah.
We tore it down, or kind of demolished it. Previous owner had a lot of pets. There was a lot of smells down there. We weren't sure what the smells were coming from. So we kind of said, all right, let's rip the carpet up. Let's see if anything happens. You know, we've never had any water issues or anything down there. So that's the issue that we're going to.
And then there's the third floor, the second floor, that presents 3 rooms. That was our major discussion.
Right.
Of that unique setup.
Yeah, so on our second floor of the house, there are 3 rooms. There is an office. It was a dressing room, I guess, is what it was called, and an office.
And the bedroom.
So by the regulations that I read, you know, any room on the second floor can be construed as, or is construed as a bedroom. I mean, so that, as far as I know, I mean, neither room has a closet. It's, you know, the ceiling height in there, you know, if I jumped, I would easily hit my head, and I can't jump that high. So, I mean, I understand that the regulations say any room on the second floor is considered a bedroom, but, I mean, they are no way in use of bedrooms as of right now.
Right, except we have to look at the structure, we can't look at how someone was using it at the time, and
Can I
there are
ask,
lots of antique homes in town that have bedrooms that don't have closets,
Right.
so it would be unfair. So we try to just look at it the same,
right.
just so you know.
Can I ask a question, though? I mean, we have 3 bedrooms on well, we'll get to on the first floor. When we purchased the house, we had 4 bedrooms.
Right. that's what this
When
is.
we purchased the house, it was a 5-bedroom, 2.5 bath. We converted one of the bedrooms on the first floor into a bathroom. So the bedroom is, so when we purchased the house, it was listed as a 5-bedroom, 2.5 bath. Now it is a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath. Ignoring
Right.
every room on the second floor is a.
In terms of
Right.
functionality.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
somebody else could, so for us, it's sort of thinking about what's the life of this house. And so if somebody else could say, boy, you know, this would be an awesome room for my 2-year-old because it's right near the master suite and I
Right.
can just put a door on and that's a room.
Right.
That's kind of part of how we balance it, is to think about for septic system that may be in place for decades, how do you
Right.
make sure that's sized appropriately
Right.
for this sort of footprint?
But I guess the one question I have on that is, if I had submitted a floor plan that, for one of the bedrooms on the first floor, if I had simply changed that to an office.
I mean, you'd still run into room count issues. So I think
Okay.
your issue is that you're hitting the 11
They're
room room
max,
count.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
fact that you call those bedrooms, or if you had 3 libraries with fold-down beds downstairs.
Where is that? Because I haven't been able to
That's
read
in
any
the-
language
It's
on.
in Title V. In the house, you divide by 2, round down when you have 11 rooms. And you have
Okay.
11 rooms presented on the November 1st plan.
Right.
So with that would be maximum for a 5-bedroom house.
Right.
So
State
just
not
have
you
a-
look at, that's room count. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So what's the
I
question?
just want to ask Mark, so, and
Yes.
Beth, so you haven't had a chance to dig into the files just
To
to
see if there were
what
permits.
Septic.
it was.
Right, because if it's a
what the septic
permitted
size
finished
is and all
basement,
the
then I
rest.
feel like, to me, that, like, if we sort of say this house had previously had a basement that was finished, that was permitted, whether that was a correct approval or incorrect approval, in my mind, refinishing the previously finished piece would sort of take some of the room count away from me, because you'd say, this
Grandfather.
was here,
Yeah.
this was approved, this was permitted, this was
In
done.
fact, you should see that plan of what's proposed, just so you can see what it looks like. So this is what was proposed way back.
Yeah.
And so this is, I don't know where to put it, but maybe you can share it. So they're proposing
She has
to
a-
go off this area that shows a table here in a game room, but
That's a conceptual drawing, and we're not planning on
maybe
doing
you
that.
can explain it to the board, because it is confusing. You only show, you show what you want, the pool area, the living area, and this is your garage, I presume.
No,
What's on all here?
So this would be just an exercise area.
Exercise, oh,
So-
I thought that was a car.
Yeah, no, so that's just, so you come down the stairs, this is the area that we wanted to finish, this was, and then,
Which is existing right now, correct?
I
Or
mean.
is this gonna be a new addition to the house?
It
no,
was
this-
existing
this
until
is-
they
this is
ripped
the
it.
basement. Yeah, so that's.
It was
what-
previously finished, you didn't like it, you
Ripped it out,
Yeah.
waited a couple of years.
gutted it.
Yep, and then we just want to refinish it
Okay.
again. So, yeah, I mean, that's basically.
And is the
So-
blue area
so-
unfinished now, or?
So this part of this was finished when we purchased the house, and when we,
This
you
is
know,
the
contacted the contractor to do it,
Yeah.
to, you know, finish,
that what it
they did a
already is or
design
not?
for the entirety of the basement.
Make it.
We have no plans on doing any of, this is a half bath, and this is kind of a game area. We plan on leaving this unfinished as it currently is.
So that's not there now? There isn't a half
That's not
bath there
there
now?
No, 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 no,
Okay.
So
So-
everything is sort of this finished foot, like this,
So-
this section is that section, and this section is
Yes.
ideas,
Yes.
but not reality.
correct.
So what was unfinished is gonna remain unfinished, and what was finished is you
It's
want to
being
redo?
refinished.
So, kind of.
Okay.
Most of the base, there was only a small portion of the basement that wasn't finished when we purchased the house. And, we tore everything out, and we're finishing an even less portion of the basement. So, I believe like this area is.
So like this is not, you're saying you're not
Yeah,
gonna do
that's
this?
this is gonna remain unfinished.
Okay, and then
area.
this is-
That's the only area that we're gonna finish.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so for us, the question I had for sort of Mark and Daryl, I know we've had discussions in the past about finished basement space, but I'm trying to remember the details of what, that's been treated differently than other spaces in the past, but I
That's
don't
correct.
remember the details of
Deed
that.
recording is what the board would normally allow to recognize the house is only it's a 5-bedroom, so if it's
With
a
finished
basement,
Okay.
with a basement. yeah,
Because we
they-
think the risks of that being converted into occupancy are lower than a similar space on the
Correct.
second floor, where we say, I refinished an attic that's now got a room up there.
So do we know, what's the current septic?
5 bedrooms.
So it is 5 bedrooms, and you've converted one of the bedrooms to a bathroom, so you're down to a 4-bedroom
The
count?
Based
def-
on usage,
Yeah,
yes.
it
Right.
shows only 4 bedrooms now on the plan. The septic plan shows it designed for a
And
5-bedroom.
the November 1st plan is the plan that we're using to count?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the accurate plan, right,
Yeah,
the November
yeah,
1st
yep.
plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so for that, we'd say, how do we oh, go ahead.
So what room
What's-
count have you gotten up to
Well,
over there?
if we
Because if it's a
consider-
5-bedroom system,
If it's an
Yeah,
11-room
do we
house,
have a
then we're to
problem,
5
like,
and a
what's
half.
the issue?
It's those, what you have is the 3 upstairs, the 8 on the first floor, and if the basement is as shown, you got 12, basically. But then, I'm sorry, the 7 on the first floor, because you took out a bedroom and made it a bathroom. What we need to do is
so I'm at
just
11.
check.
And you round down,
Yeah, I
so
got-
we're at 5.
Yeah, so we're
is there a
back to
problem?
5 with the bedroom being taken out as a
Yeah.
bathroom. But
Yeah.
was a permit pulled for that?
Yeah, that was when we first moved in.
So
We-
by submitting that first plan,
Yeah,
it
so
kind
I
of
get-
threw
I-
things out.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That,
Yeah,
that,
so I
that
think we're
was
good.
kind of my mistake, when they submitted the permit application, we gave the contractor the current floor plan and kind of described what had changed since we did it, but they didn't kind of change that, so that's where they had to resubmit the floor
Okay.
plan.
But if you look at how you count bedrooms, then
Yeah.
you're up to 6.
But that's not based on,
Room count.
so for the
It's
bedrooms,
not
if we
based
said,
on room
right,
count,
we'd
it's the
sort of
way
say,
any room on over a second floor.
I sort of feel like that gets tricky.
It
For,
does.
for me, it gets tricky because we're sort of saying we're gonna, on the first floor, use use patterns, and on the second floor, use room count. And I
Yeah.
sort of feel like we need to use
Yeah.
one
Cherry
standard.
picking.
Right, so for me, I kind of feel like, I feel comfortable with the 11 with a deed restriction, to kind of say, like, one, you're refinishing a finished space. I think if that was a permitted prior finishing of the basement, then to me, it should resolve based on you're repairing prior work and replacing and updating, which a homeowner should reasonably have an expectation of doing. If it was not permitted, then if we do the room count based on room count and say, this looks like an 11 room house, and we think we can sort of do it with a basement with a deed restriction in ways that are consistent with past practice.
Yep.
That kind of gets us there. But I just feel kind of leery about use on one floor, count on
I
another.
understand.
So do you-
What do
I
other
mean-
people think?
I agree with Matt on that. I think a deed recorded notice to the house is a 5-bedroom, so that future buyers know this is why the setup was allowed the way it is.
Yeah.
And then, and not,
with that?
not, not bedroom use of the basement.
the
And
basement.
Yeah.
you could never put a full bath down in the basement.
Yeah, I don't think we could either. I don't want to do that.
And out of curiosity, is it a walkout basement or is it underground?
No, there's a, like a
This way.
egress into the basement, into our garage, but it's covered and there's a door in the
Okay,
garage,
that's-
so.
Okay.
That's not sliding glass
No,
doors
no,
leading out,
no
so.
walkout.
It's
okay.
not at grade.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Where you're talking about the deed restriction for, possibly, for the basement, most of the examples that I have also includes that the house cannot be further expanded. Would that be in a deed restriction where he's already said possible future finishing of more?
Well, yeah,
of the
because that would
basement?
change the room count.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, then it would be reopening in a whole new
Right.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that, and
Oh, I think
you
we
mentioned
got
that,
these.
even though this is on here, you're not really planning to do that.
No.
But if you were, just be aware that then
Yeah.
You're
this
starting
works
fresh.
with what we have,
Right.
but
No-
beyond that,
nothing
By
further.
thread.
guarantees, yeah. So,
There's always a 6-bedroom septic system down the
Right.
road someday.
yeah.
Yeah, so anything after this would have to be addressing the setback.
I think it's plenty of living space after this, though,
Yeah.
Yeah, the
hopefully.
kids just have too much toys. That's the whole point.
So what,
So, okay, so, and then, so are people inclined to the deed restriction on the basement room or just,
Shouldn't we do both, like limited to 5 bedrooms,
Yeah.
because that's what the
Yeah,
septic
that's
is
what we
designed
usually
for?
five,
We usually
and
Note the
the-
5 bedrooms and note
the
for
basement
the
shall not be
basement room
used as a
pres-
bedroom?
Yeah, and it's one big open, one room.
And it
design.
remains, so the half walls
The
are
half
very
walls
important.
help.
If you
Yeah.
make full walls, then it's another room,
Then it-
so,
yeah. As they previously did with the exercise room and the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
And
half
all
walls
that
make a
other
huge
mix.
difference there.
so. And
Where you
then
putting
the
the
last
toys?
is that the
They
home
all go
can't be.
upstairs and you get to use this.
And that the home can't be expanded, so that would be 3,
It doesn't upgrade to the septic.
okay? Anything, any other?
I think that's
questions?
appropriate.
Okay, so, do we have a motion to request the deed recording as described?
Require?
Yeah, require it.
Anything with the garbage
Require
grinder,
it.
nothing with the garbage grinder?
Depends on how
Do you
the
have a garbage
5-bedroom
grinder in the
house was
house?
done.
We do.
Yeah, that would throw off the design
Yeah.
flow quite a
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
so.
That was, I mean, it
But
was.
do we know whether it was designed for garbage grinder or not?
Don't we have
I
the?
have the.
We do have that. Let's see, I have the septic
In
system
general,
application.
It's not good to use garbage grinders, even if your system is sized.
We don't use it.
Yeah, it
It
clogs
was,
up.
it's been there forever. I can't remember the last time we used it.
It wasn't designed for one, so.
Okay, so,
You remove-
yeah, remove the garbage grinder.
Okay.
Should come out.
Worst thing for a septic system.
Yeah.
Right, because there's a difference in how digested and undigested stuff,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
and how
No,
it breaks down and
we,
it clogs
we've read a
up
lot
and-
about septic systems when we moved to Sherborn. And we
Madam
saw that
Chair-
it was there but we don't use it.
Yeah.
so.
Madam Chair, because we didn't go into the depth of the file, when did you buy the house?
I believe it was June or July of 14.
Did you have a Title V inspection complete that
Yes.
passed?
Yep.
Okay, that's good.
Yes.
You know
And-
what, I'd like to add one more condition then, that's subject to your opportunity to
Yep.
completely review the file to make
Sure.
sure that there's not something that we've missed.
I'll look at it next day for you,
Okay.
next day or two.
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So, good.
Okay.
Good night.
All right. Thank
So,
you.
I
It's,
can review
Okay, smart.
the deed recording.
Okay.
I think it's reasonable what you did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it'll probably be sent to you just a little bit after they get a chance to
Right.
review the file to make
Yeah.
sure there's
Once-
nothing we've missed.
Recording check.
If you can, once,
I think that might be easier than stopping
I
everything.
get those, I can take care of all those, yeah. I did okay last week, so it should be fine.
Just doing admin stuff over here.
If I can have a left, I feel,
Okay.
which is good. Real good.
Jeff Wilson Jr.
To take a recess too. 1 minute.
all right.
Madam Chair, I'm gonna.
Okay, thank you. Good luck.
Darryl, I'm just.
Oh, okay, all right. All right, I think we could I just want to check, which item are you here for? Oh, okay, yep. All right, so maybe we'll try to wrap you up, because that's not going to be a short discussion either, probably, so. So,
This is the dog?
actually. Oh, okay.
Lisa, is this the dog?
No, what was she?
Oh, for Meadowbrook.
Oh, Meadowbrook? Where's that?
Discussion of a
Street.
butters concern, a butters, so
Street.
it doesn't say Meadowbrook on there.
Oh, okay.
Butters
Okay.
concerns
That's fine.
regarding
Coolidge
Coolidge Street project, so.
General.
So for the manganese, what are our sort of outstanding issues that we
Yeah,
need to
so,
address?
this was, I mentioned, if Rebecca can contact whoever she spoke to at the Mass Association of Health Boards and find out what would the Board of Health, like, what is it possible for us to do? Because they do have a lawyer on staff there who could probably advise on that. Just the whole issue of proving cause and effect, the Superfund sites and all the other, General Chemical, all the sites that get fought over, and those are huge and much more clear than this. So that's why I'm thinking just on a town level, it goes back to how can we put it on our radar, so maybe we can head off this, if this is if it's ledge work that's causing this, we don't wanna see this again. And how do we work on that, or at least we would know to require, or that if someone was gonna be doing ledge removal work and we didn't have a firm, cause and effect knowledge or with any certainty, they're required to take samples of every, neighboring well before they start the
Or
project. and-
notification so that homeowners may choose to do it, because you'd say,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be compelled to test my well.
Right, true,
If I don't want
okay.
to know about it, but you'd say, we should notify to say there have been, like a boilerplate letter that says there have been instances.
If you
may
want your
wanna
water
consider-
tested, so we have a
Yeah.
before and after, and then there's some agreement with whoever's doing it that they're not gonna fight that after,
Right.
it's another big quagmire, but at least we can start working on that. But the only thing I can think of now is if the MAHB has provided some, or has some idea about something on how we could help, then we could find out from them, but I honestly don't know, because it's nothing we've dealt with before. It's nothing in our regs. It's a prove-it situation, too, and I don't think we have the ability to prove it. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at any other well tests that might be in the files for properties in your area.
No, I haven't.
It's in Board of Health files. Do we want to ask the agent,
I
one
think
of
it
our
gets-
agents,
I
to
think it
spend
just
some
gets-
time
I
checking?
think it gets tricky in terms, I just don't know what the sort of disclosure pieces are, and
Yeah.
especially if there's a potential civil action, I think it kind of muddies. Like, if we're gonna do that, I would want town council's guidance, just because I think
Yeah,
it gets
and
muddy
also
with
for
the.
transactions.
Although you can do it.
If people are selling
What
their
are you
home, there's
saying?
disclosure.
I'm
Listen, my-
talking about looking at
Yeah.
the files that we have.
Yeah.
When people are putting in a new well, they have to test the wells, they give us the results, and it goes on file.
Exactly, yeah.
So you would be able, as,
And those are public records for
they're
somebody
public
else as
records.
well.
Yep. So you can come in and look through file and see, did anybody else ever have manganese in your area?
So, and
If they were
But
testing for
should we,
manganese at the time.
as,
But all the
should
new
we,
wells
as
should-
the Board of Health, recommend that her
They wouldn't get approval if they.
neighbors check their water to make sure that their drinking water is safe?
I mean,
I don't know.
I think it gets,
How
so I think.
far do we go with?
It's private
Right, and I
property,
think
but
also
we
we
should
can
maybe
advise.
we should notify people so that they
Well,
know that
That's
there
part
are
of the
risks.
reason that we're on camera tonight,
Mm-hmm.
is
Because-
as a way of informing people. So
Right.
that is an
Right.
explicit part of this.
So, but
It's
but
outreach.
making it clear to people that elevated manganese has been detected in a well in this area, therefore it may be
Yeah.
prudent for you to
But I'd
test
be-
your water.
But,
Yeah.
but
We
again,
can't
again,
require it, but we
But I think
can,
also, like, if I imagine that I were 2 blocks up, if our 2 houses up Maple Street, and you said Board of Health made a blanket statement about Maple Street had manganese in the water, and I'm trying to sell my house right now.
no, we're not saying that, we're
No,
saying.
no, but I think it, like when we just talk about muddy, like when we say everybody should test their water,
That's,
gets tricky. If
I
I'm
can-
selling a nearby house, you'd say Board of Health said you should test your water.
No, we would have to word it carefully and
Yeah.
say that we think it would be prudent, or, it may be prudent for you to
Yeah.
evaluate your water, especially if you've seen visible or had taste
Right.
Right.
issues. I mean, yours, you noticed it first by the way it looked and smelled and
Tasted, yeah.
tasted. So I think if people are having those kind of aesthetic observations, they should test their water.
well, and
But
actually.
if we had,
I-
I mean, if we had a public water supply, we'd be required to send a letter to every member of the town.
But we don't.
But we
We don't.
don't,
So
so
then
we
let's
might
not
have
go-
an obligation to notify people that this has been identified. So
But
people
it's a-
have the
it's a-
option to
Single
test.
individual.
But I think
We might
people
not
have
have to say where it is.
Well, if I can, just so the board knows what the past practice has been, when someone calls asking about their well, as long as it's not under a permit at the time, I always recommend that they test it on a yearly basis, especially the first base year, tested for everything, volatiles and organics, as well as all the general and so forth and bacteria. And if everything comes out okay, then we recommend they test on a yearly basis for bacteria, and every 3 years do the full test again. But if it didn't come out okay, to test for those items that may have been an issue. That's a general statement that has gone out for years to the general public.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the kind of,
So
that's
that
what you were
general
alluding to,
refresher
Matt.
may-
Yeah.
And certainly, if you've noticed, like we said, observations
Right.
of potential.
Yes.
So can we put out a
Degraded.
general statement to say, if you've seen changes in this, sort of use this as an opportunity to have a broader communication to sort of say, you've had an issue, but there may also be people in other part of town where ledge work is happening. So having a sort of broader communication that's not specific to a specific.
And it's just not ledge work. We recommend that
Must be any-
Across
every
the
year.
board.
You're not paying a water bill. You might as well know what you're drinking.
Yeah.
And showering in, and dermal effects and cooking effects. So you should test your water every year for bacteria,
And,
and then every 3 years for everything if you're
and
not
what are the
having issues.
strategies we've used in the past to kind of push that out? Like, is there something we can put
It's
together?
when people call in, and I think years past, I know we didn't have brochures, but we had state information, if I'm not mistaken. Ellen, do you remember we used to put flyers out on the holders
Yeah,
there? It was a while back. The state had some brochures too on protecting it well. So we had well protection guidelines. So I'd recommend if we can get more of those, a copy more, we can have those available, as well as PSAs and so forth. It's important people know to test their wells.
And it's in their best interest.
I-
It's their
Yeah, I
private
think at the
well.
very least we
We've
should.
told
Yeah.
people that for a long time.
Yeah.
It's just, there's a
Yeah.
lot of resistance because it's
But the
their
real
problem.
issue is we need to know for the schools and the
Well, the schools are
library and
tested.
the
That's
public,
totally different.
right.
Schools are
Yeah.
tested, yes.
The library is a public
I
website.
think having it on the website though, like we could even
yeah.
have like a
Yeah.
health minute and just like have a little flash so that
Yeah.
it catches people's eyes that this is something
like
that
that
I'm wondering if we could
best
ask
practices, sort
to
of.
get a notice up on the main webpage so that people don't have to go to the Board of Health
Yeah.
portion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
see if they'd be amenable, just as a reminder.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to underline, I cannot drink, bathe in, or otherwise use my water at all. I've lived in my house since 1993. I had perfect water. Perfect water. There was nothing wrong with my water.
But-
And there's been building behind me, and the rock is pulverized, and my well is compromised, and I may not, at this moment, no one can tell me how to solve this problem, including
You
you.
can have a water treatment system that treats the manganese.
Yes, you
Uh,
can do cation
actually-
exchange.
So the water treatment system that was recommended to me in November when I had 2.14 level manganese. Had I put that in, it would not be now dealing with what I have now.
I think the reality for us is while we feel like it's really difficult, we can't fix 32 Maple Street. I think our whole piece is we can kind of address the broader pieces. Anything to fix your home, it really is just not that we don't care about it, but that we don't have a mechanism by which we're the people who can resolve it. So I think for us, where this conversation is likely to be most fruitful is in this broader policy piece. I think the only way for you to get recourse is to address it as an individual, not because we don't care, but just because we don't have standing to kind of.
I understand. I'm in-
Something you might ask if you're talking to water treatment companies, is whether there are things that could be modular, and so if things change and there's flux, whether you kind of tack on, a second stage or whatever, so that you don't have to anticipate everything up front, but can you add on later? So, and that is sometimes possible. There are a lot of things that are put in series, little treatment unit of one type and followed by something else, or two, one that takes out most of it and the other one that they call polishing, brushes it off, gets it down the next level.
I'm looking at a price tag here of somewhere between $5,000 and $12,000 to $15,000.
Yep. Right, which you could have had a lovely vacation somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's not fair.
Right.
There's no fairness here.
And what, I think part of what I'm trying to, I'm reacting to, and I believe that I understand why, but you guys are speaking amongst yourselves and saying, we can't require that people test their wells. Come on, nobody's going to do that if somebody's trying to sell their property. I think I understand how difficult your job is, and let me just say thank you to all of you here for the amount of grief that you take for just doing what you do. I really appreciate all of you very much. I'm sure you would get a lot of pushback putting in regulations that require that people tested their wells. And I think you should do it. Because you do have 40Bs going in, and at that town meeting, there are promises being made. There are handshakes being done here, handshake deals with the town of Sherborn. And, I heard it said, you're going to be responsible for that, right? Yeah, you'll answer reasonably. Oh, yeah, right. Well, not so far. Not so far. Not with regard to me so far. And I'm not trying to malign Mr. Stevens. I have no reason to. I just want my water to be able to be potable, and I want to be able to live in my house the way I have previously. But again, the town of Sherborn is between a rock and a hard place with this, and I get that. And there are promises being made that I'm the canary in the coal mine, and so far it isn't happening.
I think
We hear you. We really do. And, to the extent possible, we are going as far as town council and others have advised us that we can go in terms of trying to require as many protective bells and whistles as we legally can
But I think
on these developments.
And I think also people would say, if you then were compelled to get a $10,000 system because your manganese was 0.1, you may feel less saying, I think it gets tricky about when you say, oh, everybody has to test it. And we now, that, it's not that we don't care about health. I think it's that this becomes really subtle points where just kind of what we can do, what the town is going to litigate, how those things have secondary impacts. If you say, okay, none of these houses have been tested in 40 years, you're now all compelled to test every 3 years. What are those costs? Okay, those findings happen. So I think in terms of what we're going to talk, I just think, we've talked about this issue a lot. I think you've heard us, we've heard you.
I have a suggestion about it. What if when someone puts in a new well and they, let's say, in this case, particularly if they pulverize rock, if there's ledge removal going on, Mr. Oram has stated that, it's part of the deal that they have, that the well has to pass regulations, and the water has to be tested after the well is put in.
Before it can be used.
Before
yes.
it can be used. But what about having mandatory testing of the abutting properties within a certain period of time, let's say at the 6-month mark?
I I think this is a much larger
Yeah,
conversation.
I'm throwing
Those
that
are the
out there,
kinds of
though.
thing-
I'm throwing that out there because
think
that's
those-
what I kind of thing I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think those are the kinds of things that we are trying to be forward thinking about that as development is happening, especially larger developments it's a reality that they're here and they're gonna continue for a period of, in the future. So I think these kinds of contingencies are things that we need to talk about and figure out if there's a way that we can have belt and suspenders kind of built into our regulations. So I think that that's something that we're gonna have ongoing discussions about, and I welcome your input, I think.
But even if it's a big project, I mean, if it's a 40B, it's gonna be a public water supply. Then it's a system of notification. So you have to notify people. So I don't think that even if it were a public water supply, it would change the obligation that you have to notify people when there's an elevated risk, because the state would be concerned about the level and they would want it to be potable.
I would just love to
Right.
table this issue
So-
because we are
Yeah.
not close
Right.
to resolving anything.
Yeah.
And we're spending a lot of time with many agenda points, and I
Right.
don't think we're like 2 minutes away from, aha.
No.
Like, this is a really hard problem that will be many more
I
hours
think
of
it's worthy
conversation.
of a revisit after we, when you collect a little bit more information, that
Am I
might be
leaving my
the
water here?
precipitator for the next,
No, I don't have to leave my
Discussion.
water?
I did
I don't
want
know.
to smell it at some point, but. just so I
I'm gonna
know.
have to go at 10, so whatever we
Same
need
here,
to-
Darryl.
like, I need to do by then.
Did they know
And
that one had
so
chlorine smell,
so did we ever decide the process by which we can get her well data?
Whose well data?
So,
If it's in the file,
So, but it's
it's-
emailed, the link is emailed to you, or?
I don't feel bad now.
yeah, I don't feel bad. I don't know, maybe we can mark it. Oh, no, there we go. The manganese is holding it shut.
I'll take a whiff.
Well, that does have bleach in it, so it's hard to.
Okay, that's
but
what I
here.
was smelling, so.
Oh, that's the one that doesn't. Oh, no, that one does.
No, I thought the dark one had the bleach in it.
Oh, yeah.
How do we
Pass it
capture
down.
smells in public meetings?
Yeah, it's a familiar smell.
I'm good, I don't.
I have to say, it might be a familiar smell
like
from
the chemistry.
all the work I do in industry. A lot of metal working, so.
Unpleasant.
Would I,
Lisa,
can I smell it?
we want to take a,
Okay.
ladies before gentlemen.
Right, nobody's,
Or age before beauty.
I was wondering what that smell is, now I know.
This it's kind of like sewage. It smells
Yeah, it's
Oh, but you
acrid,
know
a
what?
little
But wait,
acrid.
it hits the back of your mouth. Do you smell it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's water checked.
the connoisseurs of.
The connoisseurs of
It
manganese.
smells stagnant.
Yeah.
This
Bacteria.
feels like
The seal might be broken.
Easy.
No,
If it's
I
got
can't be your
bacteria, they
expert.
can
I'm not touching the
identify
water
if
bill.
it's
No,
They can
but
liquor, animal.
All right, I think we should do
drill should be
Coolidge
telling
Street. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
I don't have.
They
much
usually
Just
so
to
great
follow up on the
information.
stuff, like the stuff we projected, is there a way for me to make that, attach that somehow, so that it give, to enter that into your record, as it were?
should she print it and scan it?
yeah,
Looks like, are they JPEG files, I thought
Yeah,
you were clicking
yeah,
on?
yep.
If you just email it to Ellen,
That can
then,
be
I'll
part of the
print
record.
them.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I'll print them.
Okay.
I have to print.
But the JPEG files, not the link.
Yeah, right.
The JPEG files.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the link doesn't,
I didn't see what lab it was.
But I think, having it up there was probably sufficient, so. Okay, all right, so we'll talk about Coolidge Street next. So if you wanna, you can sit there, you can move up more if you want.
make sure they signed in.
Okay, did you all get a chance to sign in back there? Yes. Okay, great. She has it on the table.
You are?
Bring these over to if you
Change
can.
your name.
Daryl doesn't
I don't
want
want
it.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Sure.
sure. I think I've had one that's similar to that. I don't want to repeat it.
First of all, I just wanted to thank you. Last week when this was snowed out, I got a personal email saying that it had been canceled, and I really appreciate that because, you know, it's not, everyone doesn't necessarily instinctively go and check. So I really, that was
Thanks, Ellen.
nice. You know, we've been sitting here listening, and it just struck me that if we fast forward 2 years, there's not going to be one person with bad water here talking about manganese. You're going to have an angry mob of people who have bad water, can't drink water or shower in their homes. Their house is worth zero. We're not worrying about, you don't test our water because, what about the selling the house? It's like you have to test your water. You're putting your town at risk, you know? I don't know. So and I guess we had, and I totally think that you have an opportunity now to get ahead of this. And, you know, you're much more expert in what that means, but I think if you put your own, because we fall between, there's no public regs and there's no private regs, there's now an issue where there's blasting, there's wanting to be development. I guess a lot of the town is built on bedrock. This Coolidge, 155 units, is all on bedrock. And as I understand it, I mean, you can drive down Coolidge and you can see it. That's why it's never been developed for 50, 60 years, is because it's on bedrock. But I think constructively, I mean, if the water's bad and there's no fix except civil litigation, I think you can get ahead of that by requiring developers to put a very large performance bond, I don't know what the right word is, but that would protect all the wells that may be affected, and who knows, it may not just be abutters, it may not, we don't know how far that can go. Like where our area is, you know, the building is gonna be uphill, coming downhill. We live on the Natick border, and it's all been flooded out from development in Natick anyway. We live on a little pond that has risen 2-3 feet already just from 3 houses going in across the pond. It's all wet. The backyard is wet. The area, everything is wet. And I don't know what the impact of this development will be, aside from, I mean, that's like a small problem compared to, you know, poisoned water. But anyway, I really think this is an opportunity for the town to get ahead of this. This is, like, as she said, the canary in the coal mine. And you don't have to just wait 2 years and then have the angry mob in here with health issues and bad water and everything that flows from that, with the developer, you know, 155 units in, developer's gone, whatever. But I also think that asking the only solution is civil litigation, that is terrible for the town. It's like, I'm an attorney, not in this area, but litigation is just public, very public. And I think that's the last thing the town wants, is for a private citizen to file a civil litigation that their water is bad in Sherborn. That doesn't just affect her or affect Meadowbrook Road. It affects everyone who lives here. And it also affects everyone because at the December 6th meeting, the town voted that elderly affordable could be anywhere in town. So there can, you know, they think this project will solve everything because it's so large. But in 2 years, there's going to be a new census. You're going to be subject to 40B, whatever, and there'll be another one of these, and it'll be anywhere in town. Blasting, if there's bedrock, you know, and it's not just Meadowbrook Road or Coolidge or whatever. It's really, it's really has a forward impact. And I realize our town has to have 40B, and we have to grow, and maybe that we have to change. But I think the town planners had put that 50, 60, 70-page report in place that said 7 units a year. like that's manageable, right? You can, if there's a problem with manganese, you have time to get ahead of it, right? But putting in 155 units in one area on bedrock, it's almost, I mean, I don't, knowing what you know, just from even this conversation tonight, I don't know. Anyway, so back to I had sent a list, so I'll go back on my topic. And so the TRC report had been received on November 29th and posted on December 5th, the day before that meeting. And I read that, and it has some very, in that consultant's opinion, like very clear concerns. Like he used words like dramatic effect, profound, considering the bedrock source water and fracture flow. There's already been contamination from the general chemical plant on Meadowbrook Road. So I'm just wondering what the follow-up is from that developer's report, or the consultant's report, the TRC report.
Well, there's a group in town who's working on the general chemical issue, and TRC is a consultant who's been working with the town of Framingham for around a decade on the general chemicals, so he has a lot of in-depth knowledge about that. So that's an ongoing effort, but in a way that's in the hands of the DEP, who's in charge of the monies that are available for cleanup after General Chemical, declared bankruptcy?
Right, but although, so I went to the last meeting that the consultant was at, and Carol Boyce, Town of Framingham, stakeholders, DEP was presenting, and we did push DEP to do additional sampling of wells that could act as what we call sentinel wells for the downgrading edge of the plume. So before it would really be impacting the Sherborn wells, we want to be looking very closely at the plume at General Chemical to make sure that we're not seeing increases in contamination before it comes to Sherborn. And so they did do some additional testing, including some other contaminants like PFAS, which I'm not going to get into tonight, but, and we don't have all the results. They had some initial results that we actually requested DEP to do some supplemental sampling, and I have not seen yet the results of the supplemental sampling, but we're keeping a watchful eye on just how the cleanup that's being proposed for General Chemical is hopefully going to mitigate problems for the town of Sherborn, and we're going to look at long-term monitoring to make sure that we're keeping track of it and not having any part of the plume affecting our wells without, surprise, and then there's no money, and we're back in the same discussion that we're in now. So we don't want to get there. So I think we have at least a good system in place, and we have good representation, really keeping a watchful eye on DEP, who's handling the cleanup right now because General Chemical went bankrupt. So they're hiring the contractors, and they're trying to use the $1.8 million that's in escrow the best way they can. So I think they're making good choices with how they're going to use the money, but we're trying to represent the town of Sherborn and make sure that there aren't impacts to people's wells at any kind of levels of concern.
Other thing to add was, like Lisa did an awesome summary on that. I don't know.
A couple meetings ago?
Yeah, it was probably 3 or 4 months ago, but it's like a 20-minute review of the General Chemical that I think is a really helpful primer if you or other residents
I think it
of
was on.
Meadowbrook
Is it a piece of paper, or is it?
No,
it's this televised piece,
okay.
but it's like a really nice summary and review that I found super helpful. Somebody who hadn't looked at a lot, but a lot of that sort of TRC translated somewhat closer to English in ways
I tried.
that I found really pretty accessible.
Oh, good.
And I can see if I can track down the actual minute and date for you. I think I'd send it to somebody else. I'll try to email it to you.
Thank you.
But I think, there were a bunch of issues that I think you brought up. I think what was a sort of difficult decision at that town meeting was, the way it was presented is, it's gonna be a 40B that's more units, or we can consider changing the town regulations that were limiting the elderly affordable to within, a mile of town center, to hopefully get a lower density project with lower water demand. And, I mean, because the elderly affordable, the septic and the gallon per minute requirements are lower for that than they are for a general 40B that you might have a lot of families and, larger units. So I think it wasn't a choice of, do we want development or not? It was, do you want this or do you want that? And I think a lot of people in town, the perception was that it seemed like it was going to have a lower potential of impact and resource use with the elderly affordable than what the option on the table was. So I think it's been characterized a few different ways, but I think that was in reality what the decision that people felt that they were being asked to make. And I think we, as a group, have definitely been trying to make sure that eyes open going in for, well, what are you going to use for the water supply? What kind of testing are you doing? Is there the possibility that public water supply could be brought in for the development? Could it maybe also be brought in for abutters? What kind of testing is going to be done to ensure that there aren't negative repercussions from the development? Again, we don't want it to be reactive. We want to be as proactive as it can be. So I think we're very like-minded with a lot of the issues that you're bringing up. We'd have to figure out, though, the mechanism by which we can feed into the zoning board and the building department and all these other town boards, because we're unfortunately not the ultimate decision maker, and
Permitting agency for that. But again,
Right.
this was also the zoning board
Yep.
recently, where they talked about now changing the 40B and requesting exemption from the zoning board to change the 40B and not have it treated as a large project. This was one of the pieces that came up,
Right.
where there was support from the planning board to do that, to sort of future-proof the 40B. And the feedback from the audience was, given the concerns raised at the special town meeting, particularly about this disproportionately impacting one part of Sherborn as the whole Sherborn 40B solution, that there needs to be a larger conversation around this, and that this should not be a pro forma. Everything we want to do to avoid a 40B, we should do so it's not a 40B. Like, we want to go in with eyes wide open to say, when there's an opportunity to negotiate and to say, you want this to not have large project status with the oversight that brings with it, what are the asks that the town may put forward? And so I think kind of working also with the ZBA around that conversation with the changes to the 40B project may be another opportunity, because I don't think we have any permits that we're part of related to these projects because they're a public water supply, but it may be that the ZBA is another opportunity to get ahead of it as you describe it, about how do we make sure that the strategic development protects our residents as much as possible.
Are you saying that the developer went before the ZBA recently?
Yeah,
To,
Is it planning board or ZBA? I think the
which one's-
planning
which
board
one's-
is the one
which
who's
one's Rich Novak?
spearheading. Oh, that is
Yeah,
ZBA.
That's
so-
ZBA.
So it went before ZBA. but it was,
recently?
in the last month, it was like 2 or 4 weeks after, in the setting of the homeowner at maybe 86 Coolidge being in play. And I think the feedback from the ZBA, it was, this needs to be a larger conversation with the town of Sherborn, because we just had a special town meeting about this, and now we're changing what the project is, like 4 or 6 weeks later, with facts that are not materially different. And so I think what the ZBA had suggested was that this needs to be on this regular town meeting, so that it was full disclosure to, again, avoid torch-wielding mobs, but also because this was just talked about, none of the facts have changed, and now the project's changing. And I think the planning board, my recollection, having not seen the minutes, but having attended the meeting, was that the planning board was supportive. But again, it's all about getting to safe harbor, and I think there was some kind of continued conversation. So I think, I don't want
I
to
don't
say.
understand what the zoning board said, that they wanted to change the 40B.
So zoning board didn't say they wanted to change anything. It was an issue before the zoning board,
Okay.
where the applicant was interested in changing the 40B proposal to make the 40B project not a monolithic building, but a series of smaller structures, but would
Okay.
add to the total number of built units, the total number of residents, the size and scope of the project,
Would add more?
would add
Yes.
more.
Oh, so you hadn't heard, yeah,
And-
another
and
40
so
units, I
I think
believe.
Oh,
the
boy.
concerns that had come to the planning board, because they're the planning board, not the Board of Health, was a lot about the aesthetics. While not representing the Board of Health, but having attended all our meetings, I shared that we had heard other concerns at Board of Health that were non-aesthetic. And that, and I think ZBA was thoughtful in talking about that, but also wanted to say, this is like something on the minutes. This needs to be a larger conversation with more participation.
Okay. I want to respond to so many ideas, but I want to respond specifically to two. I know the Natick water supply has been suggested, and I don't know what's going on. The select when we're talking, I don't know what happened on that. But what concerns me, and I had a conversation with Daryl some time ago, just on the telephone, and there was something you said that triggered this thought, that if they are pumping 25 to 30,000 gallons of effluent into this wet aquifer, and they're taking nothing out for water supply, they're just getting water, from Natick pumped in, that means this land that is already spongy is going to have 25 to 30,000 gallons. I don't even know how it could absorb that. That to me seems like the worst solution.
It's totally, but the water supply is from the bedrock, whereas the discharge isn't.
Oh, she's talking about something different.
talking about
It'd be a
if
net
the
import of water if it's coming from Natick.
I understand that, but it's not
Like
like there's instant communication though with where the discharge would go from the wastewater treatment plant versus where they would be taking water out of the system, because there's a bedrock aquifer and then there's overburden, and they're not the same.
Are you talking about the on-site wells that
Yeah.
they're planning?
Yeah.
But she's talking about if they got water from Natick.
I understand that, but still,
And it's a one-way, but,
it's not a simple box is what I'm saying, like, it's not.
right, but I think that they do,
They have to take that
they
into
do
account.
a lot of testing before they put it in, and one of the analyses that they do is they look at, they try to assess what kind of buildup, and they call it, and we've had a discussion about mounding tonight,
Groundwater
but a different type of
mounding, yeah.
mounding. So
Right.
what's happening, all right, here's the surface of the
Recharge.
land, and you're discharging all this water just underground and into the soil, and here might be the water table, but I can't do it, I don't have enough hands. So, water table's here, but with all this discharge, right, it might bump up underground. And so you're asking, is it gonna bump up so much that it's gonna be flooding areas and whatever? That's part of what they're supposed to
Yeah.
analyze,
Okay.
in determining how to design it so that that doesn't happen. So that's what the DEP is.
The DEP
yeah,
is
and that's
analyzing?
flood
Plans to the
storage.
DEP.
Yep.
It's worth, there are a number of things I think that the town might want to make sure that, given that DEP is going to have control over the public water supply and over the wastewater treatment and management system, is just to check up. DEP is short-staffed. They're going to get some voluminous report from a consultant who's going to have designed the system, and I don't know how closely they check those. So we want to make sure that they've considered other things, such as the general chemical. Are the people who are going to be permitting the water supply acutely aware of general chemicals' existence? Because they might just miss it.
Yeah.
Because it's
Separate-
not
separate
within a
prices,
certain
se-
radius,
separate-
and they
and
might
it's
just
separate
not know
arms and
about
that
it.
sort of
So
thing.
we want to make
It's
sure
like
they know
everything.
about that. We want to make sure they understand that the regulations for the groundwater, for the wastewater treatment system require that when they're filling out that permit application, they identify nearby public water supplies. But all the residences are not public water supplies. So we want to make sure that they realize that there are still water supplies, even though they're not public water supplies. So all the homeowners in the area. And again, that may not be on their radar or what they're used to thinking about. So those are things that I think we need to make sure we're highlighting to them.
I think it's on the GIS map, so private wells are also included as a layer, so DEP.
They can find them.
Yeah,
but
no, I mean, DEP will have
The
that
permit
information.
application
Yeah.
doesn't require you to identify them. For the
For-
groundwater discharge permit associated with the wastewater treatment plant. At least the last one I filled
Yeah,
out
that seems, weird.
a
I'll
year and a
check
half
into
ago.
that.
So, because I was marking wells, I said, well, there's more, and they said, no, but that's not a public water supply, so. Anyway,
So,
so those are things, and then if
So
it's
you
ledge there,
are-
then they should know that, oh, there's a lot of ledge, and they may be blasting to reduce it, or there may be soil brought in to build, whatever they need to know. Just any of that information will help them analyze the setting better.
is that something that you are informing?
Well,
No.
I've reached out to the planning board just to say, because we had discussed last year at various times that when this project was gonna come to the details that they would be working out in the future, that boards and committees would be getting together to have input into that. So I've asked them when that might be happening. I haven't heard back, but I'm hoping that's gonna happen, and those should be public meetings, and anyone could come and, you know, these are things I'd like to think we have a laundry list of things that have to be considered,
But is
just to
this-
make sure.
Isn't this at the state level? Isn't this informing the state level?
But the
Yeah.
so the state level, so we aren't the approving, I just want
Yeah,
to
we're
summarize
not-
to see
yeah,
if I understand. We're not the approving body, but ZBA may include conversations about what does water need to look like in other parts of negotiation. So we may not be able to say, we won't issue a permit for this, but we may say, ZBA, this is an important issue for you to be aware of from our Board of Health expertise, even if we're not the regulatory body. So that's kind of the scope of our responsibility, is to help think about the projects, be engaged, talk about it, but we can't say, you're required to do this. Like, we're not like a requiring body. It's a-
And you don't send a letter to the EPA or the Mass
DEP,
Housing
yeah.
as a group? Okay.
We haven't. Doesn't mean we couldn't, but
And they don't have an obligation to necessarily consider it either, unfortunately, for these kind of projects. Because if it's not in the town's purview to approve the wastewater treatment plan and the public water supply.
So I think when I was saying about things to relate to DEP, it'd be more so that they understand the setting and technical issues associated that, again, they may not have time to
Unique
do their own
characteristics.
legwork
But that
on
is
it.
my
So,
responsibility, not yours? Is that what you're saying? Just to
I'm
be
not
clear.
sure who will be doing it yet, but the Board of
It's not
Health would
yours.
always welcome volunteers who want to contribute stuff, and maybe we would review
It's
it
not
and
a
pass it
defined
on, but.
responsibility for us.
Or bring it right to the ZBA.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think ZBA is the person
Yeah.
who, for the 40B, is the clearinghouse of all of these pieces. So I think ZBA would generally be the ones who are sort of integrating the different boards.
In a way, I think of that as being more the negotiating how the project takes shape and any kind of requirements that might go above and beyond state level, if they get tied to, if you do want to do that, we'd like you to do this. That I could see negotiating at the town level. But for when it comes to someone hands to the DEP the application, we want to say, when you're evaluating that, know that there's
XYZ.
general chemical, there's private wells. So it's not a
But like
ton
we,
of issues,
but we
but they
didn't send
just.
a letter for DEP when we said the library water supply has this issue. We're not the people sending a letter to DEP to say the town public water supply has this issue, right? Like when they were doing the library construction or other pieces, we're not the ones to make sure that the construction is appropriately managing the public water supply.
Not
That-
not
right.
officially.
So who is responsible?
The DEP, and the DEP was involved with
But
town building in general, but.
Is there anyone in the town that is informing the DEP, or no?
Whitewater for the
What?
library. Wasn't it Whitewater, their consultant?
Yeah, but
To some degree at the library.
So it would be kind of above and beyond what we would do standardly if we were doing that. Because using the town well as an example, right, the DEP was involved. Whitewater is the company that comes
Contract.
in, they have, the certifications to manage water supplies, and they take care of it on behalf of the town. Town pays them to do that. So,
The way the law is
Like you
written,
have
because it's
blasting,
private,
You have manganese, you have bedrock,
Right.
you have now what is like a 200-unit apartment or project going in, and I just,
But he
I'm
doesn't
just
have to ask
astonished
us-
that there's no one in the town who feels like that morally, ethically exploding
we-
to
Right.
to
we, like,
tell
don't-
somebody.
But we don't have, like, for us, it's a question of saying, hey, voluntary board, would you like to, like, right now, we spend 4 to 5 hours every 2 weeks, extending into the wee hours. Would you like to take on a much larger project on behalf of it? What I would say is, we are totally, I think, happy to engage and support, but I'd say, as Meadowbrook residents, like, I'm happy to do this. This is not my day job. I'm gonna work really hard on it. But if you're asking, do you have the bandwidth to massively expand your scope and dig in really deep and do these pieces? As a voluntary board member, I would love to say I do, but I don't. And so I'm happy to do the things I need to do for the board. I'm happy to partner. I went to the ZBA meeting, which was January 22nd, to attend because I thought that was an important issue to do. But for me to say, I can go through that and do all of those pieces and supplement the state of Massachusetts management of a public water supply for the question of, is that realistic? I think it gets really tricky about how much more stuff we can do and how we can best leverage. So what my advice would be, and I think we're trying to give it as clear as possible, is there's lots of boards. Nobody has to get our permission for any of this. And so counting on us to be the person who makes sure it goes just right doesn't give you the most leverage, power, or opportunity. And so we're trying to tell you, here's the person who we think gives you the best opportunity to address these issues that we share your concerns about. We
And
think,
that person is
so I think that's ZBA is the person to talk to
the
about.
ZBA?
Yeah,
Right.
the zoning board of appeals.
and I'd be happy, maybe not in this meeting, but to share with you people within DEP who I think would be good contacts that I just know from working with DEP. And some ideas about what to do, because as Matt points out, we have these meetings and then there's tons of work that goes on in between meetings. And right, I find it hard to carve it all out in a day, because some of it is just calling around. I'll talk to whoever I can get if I'm at a conference or something else, and I'll ask them about issues that we have in town and do what I can, but
And you don't
I
want to
can't
promise,
possibly
hey, we'll take
guarantee
care of
that
this, we've got
we
this
can
covered,
handle
don't
it,
worry about
but-
it. I want to be transparent and realistic
Yeah.
to say, here's the piece of the puzzle we can help do. But this is a massive project and it's a public water supply, and the idea that
So your role is to develop, hopefully, start thinking about these regs that you can put in place, getting ahead of things that will kind of.
but we can't do any regs for public water supply because
No,
that's
no,
what
I
makes it
know, but
public.
you are our public water, you are the protection of our water
Right.
supply. I mean, civil litigation,
Conservation.
that's not
I
a
think
good
that's
solution.
separate for a single,
Yeah,
like, I
yeah.
think, again, I'm not saying
makes
civil
sense.
litigation is a solution for Meadowbrook. None of us have said that. I think we've said for the question of cause and effect for a single property owner, that may be the only recourse. There is multiple negotiations happening between the town of Sherborn and the builder. There's a 40B process. So I don't think any of us have said tonight the best solution for Meadowbrook or other abutters is civil litigation. I think we've said other pieces. I think for 32 Maple Street, it may be that's the only available recourse. Thankfully, there's negotiation opportunities and leverage points in this larger project that's still available. But I want to make sure we're realistic about here's what we can do to help. Here are the other strategies we think should be done to help. But I don't want to say, we can fix this, or we're the people who have the power, because it's a public water supply. Nobody has to listen to us about any of it, and there's nothing we can write that will say you have to listen to us for this, because it's a public water supply. And that's why the builder may want to do that, because you now have a public water supply, and you don't need to say this is specific to the town of Sherborn.
And the DEP governs public water supplies?
Yes, DP, yep. They require
Oh, so
testing, et cetera.
what a public water supply means is there are a variety of definitions, but basically over 25 people a day are drinking the water
Okay.
from that supply. So it's,
Pine Hill.
again, when the DEP set things up, they said, all right, towns like us, if you have private wells for a home, then you regulate it, and then we'll take the bigger stuff. Nobody was thinking about all this in-between
Right.
stuff for a while, so that starts to get a little fuzzy, but that's how it ended up. Bigger ones and then leave the small stuff to the towns, so.
I think the problem is that the laws are what protect the public water supply. So our hands are tied. So we obviously want to represent everybody's interests and we want to help, but our hands are tied a little bit, and that's what. So
Officially,
we aren't
we-
sure, so we also are concerned about all the things that you're rising, all the thoughts you're raising, but the question is how to proceed, because when we talk to people, the developers know that there's no laws protecting us. We basically are living in a big loophole, legal loophole.
Well-
So some of the stuff that we're talking about now too is more advocacy as opposed to
Regulation.
Regulatory.
the authority that this board has. So we're straying outside of the authority and on topics that certainly are near and dear to our hearts in terms of public health and drinking water quality and all the rest. But it's gray. We're definitely in a gray area on this where we can try and advise based on what we know and have seen, but we can't dictate.
And the public water supply is the front end of it, and the wastewater treatment plant is the back end of it. And so both of those, I think, are under DEP regulation. And so I think, but I suspect, is it different divisions within DEP?
Yes. Yep.
And so where it goes, I think the other piece that we have been generally enthusiastic about is we would certainly love to see an arrangement where this can be an outside water supply flowing in as opposed to local wells. I think that still leaves the questions and concerns you have about where does that effluent go, how's that processed? But again, in that case, that would be DEP for the wastewater treatment plant.
And, I mean, there are requirements for things like considering recharge, flood storage, all of that. I mean, that is part of what needs to be considered in the wastewater treatment plant design and the rates of effluent discharge. So they do need to take that into, I know that, because the consulting firm I work for does that. So those
The piece
things
I don't
have to
think
be.
they have is if the design doesn't perform as expected.
What the contingency management is.
Exactly.
'cause usually
That's not for, on the property, there are a
Yeah.
lot of requirements.
Right,
But if
For
you're right next
surrounding?
door.
yeah. Catastrophic
Compensatory,
failure, yeah.
Anything like
Yeah.
that, that
Because
I
again,
haven't
it's all
seen
sort of
that.
anchored to, this would be like if this were the town of Framingham, on the system is the affected folks. But this is, again, that sort of gray zone where you say this is a public water supply in a community that's largely private water supplies. And what do you do when they sort of immediately abut and intercalate in the bedrock?
Okay. I'm, so I think the neighborhood is tasked with informing DEP and the Mass Housing, as I understand the comments. The Board of Health advocates as best it can with the the way it is. And you are considering this idea of some sort of regulation where there's this loophole that you could help try damming up this loophole.
I don't think we have a way to dam up the loophole, because the loophole's at the level of laws that are beyond our scope.
Well, I mean.
No, it's a condition.
It's not.
Like, you have the authority to make a town regulation, correct?
Yeah,
It wouldn't
we do,
govern
but
the
they don't
public
have to
water.
necessarily comply with
right.
town bylaws
Yeah.
depending on the size of the project.
For this specific
Body
project.
Project.
Right.
There's
No,
already been
but
one
for other
precedent,
projects,
but there's
maybe.
already
Other
been.
projects in a general,
Right.
in a general, way of thinking
And I
about
can
this.
say that the board would really need support for that stuff, because when the board's put forth changes to regulations in the past,
I'm sorry?
the board would need support for that
There'd need
kind
to
of
be
thing,
broad
because
community
it hasn't
support.
always been well received when we're talking about adding regulations in the past. So we'll let you know. If
But I
we're
think
getting to
that
that
that-
point, it'd be helpful to get public input anytime we're considering regulations, but from different perspectives would be
But those
nice too.
regulations
There
would
has
still
been
not
a
resolve this
precedent
project.
set.
No, not, they would not
Um,
affect this project.
With this is not a 40B project, but if it were, there has,
No, the 40B is the public, I mean, that's,
right. No, but what I was starting to tell her is just, there has been a precedent set where a 40B permit was rescinded from a developer because it was going to potentially affect the water supply of an abutter. But this is not a 40B project, so it is, the state doesn't have the same level of interest.
I mean, I think this is a 40B
No, it
product.
is.
Like, this is
It
Part
is.
of
mixed.
Coolidge Street.
It's
Right.
both.
Yeah.
It's
Okay,
right,
well,
it's across the
so it would
street, it's
both.
40B.
I don't know exactly where your property is, but,
It's both.
yeah, you're right, so it would probably apply in that case.
But I'm not sure, like, I think then the state would probably have to be the one pursuing.
Right, it would be the
Like, I don't
state,
think
not
we're
us.
standing to
Right.
Pursue it.
But I would encourage you to talk
Enforcing,
to other
right.
boards in the town, like we said, ZBA, and even the selectmen, because I think it's important that, your voices are heard in several venues, because we're just one body and we have limited jurisdiction and power.
The more-
And so I think it's good to really get your voices heard by all the boards.
But I think that we also, maybe we're assuming that I think that the biggest challenge, at least from my perspective, is that it's really complicated understanding exactly what the problem is, and that whether or not everybody's drinking water is potentially at risk. And Artis, unfortunately, has this circumstance that suggests perhaps there are some bigger potential implications for more people. But because these things are hard to prove, I think that we need to increase our sort of level of education and communication with the community, because it's the geology and the geography of the town are what are giving us our challenges of how the water and the wells affect the public health, which is our jurisdiction, which is obviously your concern.
Right, which I thought I was at the right place, but I'm,
No, well, you are in the right place.
just wanna
What
be
we're
cognizant.
saying is
Yeah,
that
this
our,
has got 13
our
items to resolve
ability
tonight.
to help
I know, I'm
apparently
looking through now.
is limited because of the way the laws are written. So for example, I called the DEP. They said, you have no jurisdiction
because it's not.
because
It's a public
it's a
water.
private,
Yeah.
it's a private property. And I said, well, I want to help this person. And they said, well, that's nice, but it's, the way the laws are written, it's private property and it's between her and the developer.
Okay, we're mixing and
I-
matching
Yeah.
a little bit, I
just-
think.
I just want to, I think you
Right, yeah.
correctly summarized the issues and kind of advice. I would say the question of whether the neighborhood communicates to DEP, I'd put that in the sort of general advice as opposed to direction from Board of Health. I think, just in the interest of time, I think it's 9:30 with a lot of stuff left on the agenda. I think this is a big issue that will continue to drive conversation. I think the boards that I've seen it come up for are Planning Board, ZBA, Board of Health, and so I'd certainly recommend having members of Meadowbrook as invested parties, because I think everybody brings their own lens. I think some parts of town are really focused on solving the problem of 40B, and they may have a different agenda or a different set of problems they're trying to solve, and I think you guys have a particular set of problems that are really acute to you, and the best way to make sure those
We're
are
not
represented.
opposed to 40B, just to be clear.
No,
It's just
but
like
I
a
think,
massive,
like,
Yes.
but I think,
15, you're adding
High
15%
density,
to the town,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
but I think my point is, like, everybody has a little wedge, and the
Yeah.
best way to make your voice heard is to make sure that pieces of your wedge are in all these conversations, because otherwise it doesn't come up. And so those, like, I think those are the places I would make sure that you have a voice to kind of have the updates, because I think Ellen does an amazing job with the Board of Health minutes, but I think things can lag because a lot of stuff comes up. And so just being able to hear with your own ears, this is what they talked about, we can have a conversation and we can advocate, is the other general strategy I would have, because I think everybody wants to hear and support our community and make the best choices. But if you're not in the room, your voice isn't heard.
And I'd say for me, for any meetings I'm at, I'm happy to advocate for all of the protections for water supply, and I do that, and they I think it'd also be good if they hear from someone other than just
Right.
me at meetings, so, because then it's, oh, yeah, of course, that's what she's saying kind of thing,
Right.
so.
I think there's
the
power
more
in
the
saying,
better.
this
Yeah.
is me. I think it's a point that artists made and kind of said, this is not, I think part of what happens when it comes from our board is that this is an abstract, this is a larger narrative, and it's much harder to dismiss, this is my home that I raise my children in, or I'm raising my children in. This matters to me a huge amount. If there's a silent carcinogen that may be pulled rapidly into my home, that's not trivial, right? Or whether it's manganese or the other pieces, and I think there's an incredible amount of power that having this immediate, I'm the person who it's touching, is an important piece that isn't represented when we're speaking the abstract about general pieces, that is also just, you guys are the only ones who can bring that.
Yeah, well,
I don't have a great sense for DEP, how much at that level they care at all about the individual.
I mean, I'm an LSP and I
Yeah.
deal with DEP all the time, and their budget's pretty lean, so they have a mandate of what they need to focus on first, and I will be realistic and just blunt and tell you this is not gonna be high on their list of priorities because they have a mandate to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and they're going to deal with things like large public water supplies, which are mandated and required to monitor and regulate first. So
What I would say it's worth contacting them about is, and there are different regions in the state, so there are 4 regions in the state. Someone was mentioning to me that the central region is starting to do some interesting progressive hole patching kind of work, so maybe everybody's trying to do that, but I just heard specifically about them, Central Regional Office. But if you contacted the 4 regions and said, have you had any experience in your region with bedrock disruption and changes in water quality in neighboring wells, and just find out if they've seen it. Because that's, if I had time, that's what I would do, is, and if you find out, let us know, because then we'll feed it into, what are we gonna do about it? But that would be the kind of, have you witnessed this? Do you have documented incidents?
there's 4 regions: Northeast, Central, Southeast, and Western. Yeah. There's different.
We're
And within
northeast.
each region, they have a water supply, water quality department, and wastewater management, and so there hazardous waste, and there are lots of different departments, but each region will have that, and you could just ask to talk to the people who do that and see if they know stuff that you could use.
No.
No,
They have a
well, they
private-
would just know in
That's,
general.
but research is still research,
Yes.
so if, she's saying that they might have
Yeah, they
little
might know.
pilot
Say,
research programs going on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They might know of a public water supply that was impacted by a big
Yeah.
bedrock ledge removal project. You never know.
Well, I mean, there are the prisons in Norfolk County and where the manganese levels were in the globe last spring because of what work that was being done or not being done, and the prisoners complained because their water was brown. And because it was a the issue in this particular case was because it was a private water supply, the owners didn't do anything, even though the DEP issued them notices. And so there's an interest at the state level to try to protect private water more than there has been in the past because of the increasing development, increasing pressures for development. And so this is actually on the radar at the state level, but the problem is there's so many issues at so many different levels so that the northeast region of DEP has a section for private water supply.
That's good. Saves rabies.
Okay. All right, I'm sure we'll talk again. As I said, I'd be happy to put
Thank you.
names of people I've worked with there that I thought were helpful or something like that. You can ask me and I'll try to get my memory to work, so.
should we?
Okay, and then if you could share, if you learn anything that you think would be good for the Board of Health to know, that'd be great, if you can just feed it back to us somehow.
In other words, we do appreciate you guys.
Absolutely.
Volunteers, we understand, I think.
We're just here for the glamour.
Yeah.
And then
We're here for the TV.
And I forwarded you the link to the general chemical discussion in that YouTube, and so. Awesome.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks.
So should we talk about Sadie now?
I had a feeling you were gonna request that.
Yeah. It's just like, what should be pretty
Out of
non-contentious?
curiosity, so do we wanna free Rick? If these are smaller issues, I don't
Yeah.
know, or just keep
finish the
going?
meeting.
I don't know that we're gonna finish before Matt has to go, but,
I hope so.
all right,
I think there
so,
may be questions on the 59 North Main, so maybe if we want to prioritize this stuff, that folks may,
yeah.
like if the butters may have questions with the Noblesse.
I wonder if the 59 North Main,
I don't see any abutters here.
yeah, there are no abutters. I did speak with Nobis about his
The correspondence.
recommendation about, so I don't know if you got a chance to read
Yeah.
through it, but there were 5 wells being
Yeah.
considered for testing.
This, I think vaguely touches on, just in terms of, as another example of a 40B, where this is the conversation with the ZBA. Like, in some ways, this is kind of an illustrative example.
Oh, true.
Either way.
Okay, anyway, I spoke to them because we wanted them to test the wells around this project, just to see what the impacts were and put
Right.
monitoring in. And so they had a very different proposal, which was none of that.
Right.
And a different.
Testing on property
different
instead of
pumping
off
regime,
property
yeah.
and, yeah. all that.
And then Nobis reviewed it, and he said, well, test these 2, and then there are 3 across the street, and pick one. So I contacted him to say, okay, I'm sure we're gonna get the question from
Which
the
one?
2 who aren't
Yeah.
included.
Why aren't,
If the issues are that wells are on a bedrock, you don't
yeah, what happens if
know
mine is and
if-
theirs isn't?
Exactly.
Right,
So
yeah.
I said, so I just need to know, what are we gonna say?
Yeah.
To the people who are going to inevitably ask about that. And he was using, to some degree, just some balancing of cost and
Yeah.
technical
Mm-hmm.
feasibility. So technically, it's feasible to do, but it is going to be more cost. However, we did go through costs, and the incremental costs are on the margin, because once you've got the equipment and the staff out there, to add another well is not such a big deal, so it looks like it's really not as big of an
We're ta-
issue. And then he said in practice, what he's found when they've offered the monitoring to surrounding properties, that a lot of people don't.
Right, they
Take it up.
decline, yeah, they decline.
So I would still suggest that we request that it's
Offered, yeah.
to all of them. Again, because we're talking, he said it's $200 a week to rent the unit that you drop in the well to monitor
Isn't it like a
the level. So,
transducer?
yeah, so that's just not a lot, and that's truly a marginal cost
Yeah,
compared
it
to
is. I
hauling out the
actually
equipment.
just priced
to-
that out for a site, so.
Is there a way that, I'm trying to figure out, I think what we said is, we're happy to go with no gloss. I feel like a lot of what we wanted is fundamentally represented, and I sort of feel like we may end up in a lot of discussion about, why are you asking for more? Like, what if we said, we'd recommend it was offered. If it's not offered, then we'd recommend that homeowners be given the opportunity to sort of pay just that incremental cost, so that, I'm sort of picturing if the developer says, no, you told us to say the consultant said this, and then you're asking for more. Like, if you could then say, okay, great, there is no more that you're actually asked to being paid for, we're just saying, you're saying you're committed to protecting the interests of the abutters, letting them benefit from the fact that all of this upfront global cost is there. If they want to choose to do their own marginal cost for the 2 properties that aren't selected, it seems much harder to object to that than it is to make a blanket statement, you're asking for more once we hired a third-party consultant. Does that make sense? Like, is there a way to say, test one of the wells and give the other two the opportunity, if they wanted to pay $200, to benefit from the testing as well with the same protections, so that if it's declined, you have to say, I'm literally declining the data, as opposed to a broader global generalization, you're always asking for more.
I don't, I don't understand your point.
So I think from the conversation we had at the last ZBA, even as we talked about like the water runoff and the fact that the testing was not appropriately distributed for the consultant there, when there's any feedback about that, it was almost, I think by the applicant, pretty dismissed, because they said, you're just asking for more stuff and this is burdensome.
Every developer does that all the time.
But I think like,
Right,
for
like
us,
yes.
I'm trying to think about how do we make sure that even in the worst case scenario, the other two properties on the other side of the street have the opportunity to get tested. And so but I think he's saying test one of three.
No, he's saying that he thinks that they be asked to monitor up to 3 abutter wells, and he lists a priority.
But if you're one of those 3 abutter wells, there's 3 that represent one test site. And he's saying if you're eligible, doesn't mean that you will be offered. So that's like the next paragraph. I mean, you guys are totally more expert than I, but it was like so I may be misreading, misunderstanding, and I'm totally.
Okay, I'm going to back up a little just for a
Yeah.
moment. So part of the issue is that technically, he would recommend testing all the wells.
Right.
It was a financial consideration and balancing, and I said,
It's a
well, that's
cost-benefit
really not,
analysis.
that's our job.
Okay.
Or ZBA's job, or the
Right. We're doing
applicant
this
to
strictly on
negotiate.
technical.
We
Okay,
just
right.
want
Okay, that makes
technical.
sense.
So,
Yeah.
and then, so I said, but, we do try to be sensitive to
Yeah.
how much things cost, and then that's when we talked about,
It's a trivial cost.
mobilization costs and costs for the equipment and
Okay.
and the marginal cost of people being out there for, an extra hour or two. And then there's some physical issues of, he talked about the stilling well, so that you're not just dropping this monitor down where it could get tangled with wires and pump parts, and if that happens, then it really does get costly, and it does disrupt the neighbor's supply. So they're planning to drop basically a tube, along the side of the well casing, and then put the monitor in that. But he said in all cases, you can't feed that in because something's in the way, and so even when you go to do it, you don't get 100% of the well's work in trying to feed this tube in, that then you can put the monitor in. He said, so that kind of eliminates some just by physical
Like someone else just
practicality.
can't do that.
Yeah, if it can't be
Not
done
without
easily.
risk to the wells,
system.
undue risk,
Okay.
because then
Yeah,
you
I think
really
that,
are.
I think that's
So-
reasonable to say that, because we don't want them damaging
Right.
someone's well. But, so the way I read this is, he's saying 1 is sufficient on the other side, so offer it to 3. Chances are, not all 3 are even gonna say yes, but, but make no guarantee that it's gonna be sampled just because we're requesting. But then the 2 on either side, on that side of the street.
Should be tested.
Are gonna be tested. So I'm comfortable with,
Okay.
with this approach, because, I don't know, it does seem like a decent balance to me of technical and costs, and it seems adequate.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
I
I
think
would like to be able to
Your question
offer
is
it
like,
to all
if
as-
I'm the other person, where I'm like, you didn't pick me,
Yeah.
I have no way to get this data, and I'm
Right.
really concerned, like, why didn't you pick me?
Yeah.
I am in no way reassured, and so I think my question is, I will totally defer to the superior technical expertise of you guys, and I think your point, Lisa, of for sampling data, I don't know that we'll get materially, like, I think what we're managing here is psychology, not hydrology, where I think your point is, we should get a reasonable sample and balancing this from testing this way. I think your point is, how do we tell members of the community, your neighbor's well is getting tested in this
Well,
and yours
but
isn't?
also,
But I think if they
you could
want it, they
have
should be
this as a well,
Right.
and this is a
Right.
well, and the fracture runs here,
Right.
but not
Right.
here.
Right.
So,
Right.
to
So-
me, 1 out of 3 doesn't
But
necessarily.
it could also be the one next to that, Daryl, too. Like, I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
there's gonna be uncertainty.
Yeah.
So it's really, is this, are we gonna have reasonably high probability of seeing a problem if it exists? And I think they're trying to come up with, well, what's the bare minimum for us to have a
Right.
high probability of seeing a problem if it exists? Well, that's 3 wells. Would 5 be better? Of course. So, I mean,
like finding that.
yes, but you gotta draw a line somewhere, too.
Okay, so there's a few levels. There's take what he has, and they do that, and they end up with 3 total. Yours is kind of an in-between, offer it to everyone.
Right.
They pick, well, definitely those 2, and then they pick one from the 3.
That is what
and the
they're
other
saying.
2 can
Right.
opt in by paying.
Right.
Then there's,
Recommending it be required.
do it for
three.
all, offer to all 5, whoever accepts, try to do it. Chances are, not everybody will accept, and/or
It might not be feasible.
you won't be able to install it.
Right, right.
I guess I'm feeling like, I'm not so comfortable with the cost burden on the, being put on the neighbors to
Okay.
have to pay,
Yeah.
because this is a big project. When you think
Right.
that it was a single-family lot in its past, and there will be 12 homes there, right? 12.
Yeah.
You're saying
So-
$400 won't be the thing that makes it not profitable?
I mean,
Right.
that is just for the transducer, though. It's,
Right.
'cause then you have the labor and then, but it's not a huge outlay of money.
Right.
Right.
It's not.
Relative to the whole size,
Size,
and
it's
so
very
Test
small.
all of them?
to waive the
Yeah.
rights of
Yeah.
some people for purely a financial hardship recognition or perceived hardship.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's not where I see the financial burden having to fall, I guess. So, but something in between testing all and what he has, I can see as being possible, but I am definitely leaning towards at least offer it to everybody.
Yeah.
Give them a chance.
I think that
so.
makes sense. And then, because they don't know what's gonna happen, and they don't, like we said,
Yeah.
they could have problems installing the Stiller well in,
Right.
in any of these locations.
And again, I appreciate what he did, but he was kind of doing what we would do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We might make that, or ZBA is gonna bring in
Right.
those other factors, but we're just trying to look at water supply, quantity and quality, and that's, so he went beyond, which is not bad. I mean, he's trying to bring in a different practicality or something.
It seems
but-
like broadly, we feel like we are making minor adjustments to what we find a largely reasonable proposal, and it's more about kind of fairness and equity, rather than like, this is way off base. So we'd sort of say, ZBA, our recommendation would be offered to all of the potentially impacted wells, because the incremental cost for these additional abutters is small.
And they
ZBA
got
can do
the,
with it what they will.
Right.
so he doesn't recommend the 48-hour testing because he feels that it's balanced by the higher pumping rate. But he did want simultaneous. So it's simultaneous, but it's not 48 hours,
It's
which we were
math.
initially. So that one is a change in the requirements, and I don't have any arguments with his technical analysis on that front, because he had a justification for why he thought the reduced hours would be
But with a
okay.
higher pump rate, yeah.
So, and then with the recommendations of, when you start things and what you're observing and that kind of stuff, so. The meeting that this is going to be discussed at, the 26th, right? I believe is, I have a track banquet to attend, so I may not be able to go to that ZBA
Okay.
meeting. So I don't know if anybody else would be able
Is
to
it at
go.
7?
I think they start at 7 or 8.
I think it's 8.
I'm hopeful that I should be able to attend if nobody else can. If
Yeah.
everybody else is going to.
I
I'd
will,
love-
I'll
but-
put it on my calendar.
If the track thing is done, I'll come over, but I don't know how, it starts at 6:30, I
It
think.
seems unlikely to be done at 7.
They move a lot faster
have to
these
real
What
days.
is the meeting? What is the meeting?
26.
Of February.
Yes.
So the Monday after school vacation week.
So would
Team.
that be
Oh, but if,
a posted meeting? Would a quorum be attending?
I don't think so. I'm happy
depends on
to,
how many of you
I'm
are
totally
going.
happy to skip to avoid a quorum.
Yeah, but we can.
Now nobody's
but we-
going.
But if we go to the meeting and we don't have a posted meeting,
You
we can
can't
talk
talk.
as long as we don't talk to
Talk
each
to each
other.
other, correct.
I'm happy to
So-
not talk to anybody, just you.
I can't be there.
We're observers
can't
that
be
will
there.
be
I'm taking
vocal
that
as
day off.
necessary.
But we're not gonna represent the board anyway, we're gonna represent ourselves.
But I think,
if we
I think we
speak.
actually can
No,
represent
we're
the board.
observers for the board, but
Right.
it's not a Board of Health meeting.
Right.
So,
No, but what I mean is if I were to make a comment, I would be commenting on my own opinion, not, I
No,
wouldn't
I
be
think- I
speaking.
think
no,
part of
you're
our
the
job-
board,
part
you're
of
the
our- part
board,
of our
so
job is to-
anything that comes out of your mouth is representing
Because
a
I think the
board
question they'll
statement.
have is, does the Board of Health find
Are
this
we
generally
comfortable
reasonable?
with it? Yeah.
And then we would say, this is what we would recommend.
Yeah.
Broadly, we found the proposal reasonable.
Yeah.
So maybe we can just, is it possible for us as we get closer to kind of provide an update about who will be there so we can
Yeah.
define whether it's a.
How about you remind us? Is that possible?
Yeah.
So who's going to this meeting?
Yeah,
And I'm away February week, vacation
it's a week before, it's a Monday
week
after
after.
school vacation.
You'd have
Right.
to let me know then by the end of this week, if you're away.
No, I'll be back like the Friday before.
But if I need to post a meeting, that's not soon.
Well, I
Why is
think-
it, why
I
are
think-
you posting
No,
this?
but I think her
Well,
point is,
because
if
you
you're gonna
can
be
be
a
at a
quorum,
meeting with a
acting like a
quorum.
quorum, I have to post it.
No, no,
I
no.
would say
Oh,
I-
which meeting are you talking
I'm
about?
talking
ZBA.
about the ZBA meeting.
Yeah, if you're a quorum and you're at a meeting, you have to post it.
Oh,
I promise that I'm totally happy not attending, so if you two are attending, there's no way you're attending.
she's not attending.
Yeah,
Where are you?
track banquet.
I will bow out too,
Right.
like, we'll make it so it's
Nobody
not a
will be
But
quorum.
so maybe we can just touch base,
we're back
if you
to-
can set
is
us a
anyone going?
reminder, late the week
Well,
before,
if
and we
Matt-
can just, like, I'm happy and available to attend.
Okay,
But I think we should have no more than 2 Board of Health members
Yes,
attend.
I agree.
And so the 3 of us can touch base
Yeah.
to make sure that no
That
more
sounds
than
good.
2 are planning.
yep.
And Daryl, there's no way you'll be there, so we won't reach out to you. 'cause
We'll
you-
have a max of 2, Ellen, okay?
Okay.
How about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And an alternate.
And one in disguise.
All right, so we can check
Okay.
off that box.
Okay. Quick thing on the budget, just so you know, in case anyone stops you in the street and asks you. The only thing they asked is that we take off the
No.
$10,000 for the consultant, because we didn't come up with a concrete plan
Scope?
for the monies.
Okay.
So,
So we will, we
I
will,
said, no problem, we fully anticipated that, we had it as a placeholder in case we
Yeah.
got to that, but
Yeah.
we haven't
okay,
had the
as long as they give
ability
it to us when we
tackle
ask
that.
them.
That's what they said.
Okay.
And they thanked us for our hard work and for helping to keep Sherborn pristine.
Yeah, I don't
They
think
really said
everyone in
that?
this room would agree with
Yes,
that.
they did.
Trying to.
They
Yeah.
did, they did say that,
Pristine.
I'm
yes.
sure that's what
Um,
someone who
Daryl,
just left feels about us.
George Fisk is here,
Oh,
and I believe it's about caucus, and that was one of the items that I had added,
okay.
because I was going to report to you, if you didn't already hear, that caucus has been moved to March 1st.
I thought it always was March 1st.
It was March 15th.
Oh,
Before.
I've only seen it since it's been March 1st, so
Okay.
I guess.
And then if George wants
Yes.
to say anything.
Supposed to be?
Yes.
I just happened to be in the building, I thought, well, I'll take this opportunity.
To come have some fun at the Board of Health.
So anyway, I'm here on behalf of the caucus committee, and I had talked to Ellen, and I just wanted to be sure that everybody was cognizant of when caucus is, which is, we had set the date of the 15th initially, but the timing of that was not good. If somebody wanted to take out papers on the 15th, they'd have to have them in by the 16th.
Oh,
And we didn't think that was a good idea, so we moved it to the 1st.
First, wow.
It tends to be, we've had it as early as late February, but that's really kind of early for people to get thinking. And this is, we ordinarily would have had, I think, on the 8th, but there was another event already scheduled at the community center. So it is at the community center on March 1st, which is a Thursday at 8 o'clock. And I
Okay.
also mentioned, which I'm sure you're well aware of, but I want to make sure that you recognize the board is moving to 5 members instead of 4. So just to keep that in mind, and that's really all I wanted to convey.
Okay,
Okay?
all right, thank you.
how much in advance do we know, how many people are,
It can be the moment
putting in
of, right?
papers for
We
a
do
seat?
not know. We try to get a sense as to who's running, and from our perspective, ideally, we'd like to think that there's at least one person running for each position.
Right,
Because if there isn't, one of our jobs is to do our darndest to try to get somebody to run.
right,
typically not report. We'd like to at least get the word out, that's what I'm doing.
Right.
So that people think about it, and we really have some thought as to whether individuals want to run or whether there are people you want to encourage to run. But it's conceivable that there's a position open after caucus, that nobody's run for a position, and then, you know, you would need to take papers out, and we would be looking to encourage that. We might on our own be searching for candidates for that very reason. So, and there's a time frame within which papers need to be taken out and then turned back in.
Right.
The election is in early
May, yeah.
All right,
I appreciate it.
sure. Thank you.
Thanks.
The other thing I thought was, oh,
I was gonna stay, but I haven't really reached everything I got. I had the flu for like over a week, so I just don't wanna push it. But can I just ask, am I able to find out if they hydrofact? Well, I was staying around to talk to you afterwards, Mark, but is that something it's like?
That would be on file, but hydrofracking is not
That isn't-
required to be noted to us.
Yeah.
So they can do
Absence
that
of the-
without,
Folks said it is.
then if they have to, they don't. I haven't seen anyone report
Yeah,
that to
well,
us.
We've never gotten reports.
So it's either it's never happened or it's never been disclosed.
That's true.
'Cause
One or the
I
other.
specifically asked him that today. I said, you know, as I
Maybe some
understand it,
other
there's
towns
lots of-
require.
And he was like, oh, no, you talked to Mark Gorham, you know, we have to fill out all this stuff.
That's when you drill a well deeper.
That's
or
when
drill
you're
a
drilling
well.
Yes, yes.
That's
Oh,
different.
you're saying, did they
Originally-
hydrofrack
Originally,
their well?
Yes, exactly. My
Oh.
well, that's right next to me.
I
To
wouldn't
install
know.
it?
Wouldn't know.
You
Yeah.
wouldn't know unless
They don't tell us
report
the
it.
means by which they install the well, right?
Unless
They-
it's on their report. Sometimes it's on the report, but depends on what they wish to report.
But it's not
As-
required.
Okay, so do we have
Is a well
those,
report public
uh,
record?
They have to
Which
say
well we
where they're gonna
Reports
put
yet?
it.
I know. Whose well
Which well are we
talking
talking
Green Lane.
about?
Maybe we need to
Green
require
Lane,
that
we
on
can
our
look
well.
This well,
To
the
see,
new well that
those
put in.
wells have been
Require that
drilled.
in
Yeah,
our reg, on our regs.
But again,
Okay, so,
I don't have the files in front of
Yeah.
me, but if it's required on a state form, it would be there. The state form that they fill out
so maybe
for
the
the
Green
drilling.
Lane.
And they have to submit
Somebody
those to
over
the
there.
state too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just see.
The well driller.
Yes, they do. The well driller is mandated by the state law to submit
Let me see if it's
to
on
the
here.
state the information from drilling the well, the depth, the bedrock.
Right, this is where
Yeah.
he's like listing all
Yes,
this stuff.
yes.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff.
Yes,
Fencing, screening.
Yields and all sorts of.
yes.
Yeah, they do have it on
Yes.
the new
This is part of it
DEP
right here.
form has fracture enhancement, so
And
they would report it.
And they have the location of it
So
too,
we'd have
because
that.
they're trying to collect data for the future.
Yes.
But we are not the,
Now, the files would
Be
have
on
to
the
be
file.
pulled and just see what they had
It's
on
called
there.
fractured enhancement, that's how they label it.
okay,
Okay.
so I could call.
That's usually to get a better yield, too.
They must have been doing it.
Right.
Yeah, you can come over anytime and look at files.
Okay,
Thanks.
good night. Okay.
But
I hope you feel
anytime.
better.
Yeah.
Take care.
I'll save Sadie for him.
You're gonna save
So we need to
Sadie?
reschedule, how many meetings do we need to reschedule now?
One.
I'd like to
Definitely
be,
April, but weren't we saying something was, oh,
I'm not
just,
gonna
no,
be
we
here.
were, never mind, that
Yeah,
was
that we
for,
might do a separate meeting.
for Horsley, so now we'll
Yeah.
have to find out from Horsley what days are good for him.
And just so
Do
you
you wanna
know-
just contact him and say that if he could give us a few dates
In-
in March, and it's up,
That work
that
for
we could
me
then-
and for you.
and then we
Okay.
could, you know, if he gives us a few, you
Okay.
could do the first cut of work for you with him, and then bring a batch so we can choose, and just let him know he would be the only thing on the agenda, so time could be a little more flexible,
Okay.
maybe, start
Maybe.
time.
so what are the dates that we have for meetings right now?
Well, let's just talk about the one that we need to change.
Okay, which one are you?
The April 4th, right?
Right, that's the one I
Yeah,
want.
that you,
I'm asking that we change that
we
one.
could move to.
So when's the second one in April?
There is no second one in April because it's April school vacation
I
week.
know.
So,
Which is the vacation week of the school?
16th.
Could we do it on Wednesday, the 11th?
That works for me.
Looks okay to me right now.
We're talking about moving the April 4th meeting to the 11th. Oh,
I would be out of town on the 11th for a national meeting for my professional society, but I totally don't mind missing if necessary.
call in.
I could I?
You could. It
I
takes a
thought
bit
we
of setup, but,
I'm totally happy to not call in too.
all right,
Don't make him call in.
okay,
And
I
Darrell,
can
just
be
so you
here
know,
in
I won't be
spirit.
here
I'll be in
March
Orlando
7th, but I'm
in
sure Beth will be.
okay.
So.
Wait, March.
This is great.
Wait, is this April? Wait, which meeting?
April.
April.
Fourth's going
April
April
11th.
11th.
Wait, so when's our meeting, or, I can't make the 21st, and when's the other one? The 7th?
The 7th for March.
Yeah.
We're not moving the March. I missed the first part. I want to make sure I'm no more
Right.
confused than I
And
think
the
I am.
March
no.
date
Okay.
is,
March 7th.
They're the first and third
The
Wednesdays.
7th and the 21st.
But we're not moving either of those.
Those are
Those are
staying
just
put.
stated
Right.
facts.
And everyone else can make the 21st, so you'll still have a quorum.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so are we agreed that we're moving to the 11th, so we pick up Rebecca and we drop Matt?
That sounds like an upgrade.
that might be
Yeah,
worse. I mean, it might be better to have Matt than me.
I am entirely flexible and cheerful. I have no.
You sound pretty
Yeah.
cheerful about
Flexible
that, so,
and
okay, we'll do the
cheerful.
11th. Okay, and that'll
want it to
spread
be
things
the
out, because if we're gonna have
Yes,
3
right.
meetings in
It'll
March, we
actually
might want
s-
a
it
little
will
more of a
spread
gap
things out,
there.
yeah.
Oh, visiting nurse, actually, Ellen, you want to explain what has
Yeah.
happened? Because I view
Yeah.
this as
The
kind
day-
of an important
Now, the
question about how we proceed in the
The
future with
visiting
this.
nurses is in our budget. They do all our communicable disease follow-ups. They also do some work with the Council on Aging. One of the nurses goes to their monthly luncheon and does blood pressure screenings. She'll give talks and that type of thing. The day after, the morning after, Darrell and I attended the advisory budget meeting. I get a letter in the mail from the BNA that they're no longer going to be working with boards of health.
Oh.
So that means no communicable disease follow-ups on Maven. I'm not a nurse. I can't do it. They're terminating effective April 1st, according to their letter. So I had called her because, turns out the native VNA only deals with, although they have all these towns listed on the letterhead, they're only dealing with Medfield, Sherborn, Hopkinton, and Holliston. Those are the only towns they have left. And they're,
We just knocked off the rest of the letter.
they're just
So, like, we're, yeah, in
stopping
this
it.
line of
Yeah,
business.
it's just, she said it's
I wonder why.
financial, that it's not worth.
It's not worth it. They're not
It's
getting
not worth it.
compensated enough, yeah.
What is the,
So-
can I ask the monthly payment? Do we
We-
have a contract on
We pay
Monthly
them
payment?
an annual stipend.
of 15,000, something like
No.
that? Oh,
No.
$100.
$300.
So,
That's why they're getting out of business.
they're stopping. So I did call her because the other 3 towns do have, they pay based on an hourly basis. We pay on a flat fee. We pay in December and June. So I called up and I said, well, geez, for Sherborn, April 1st, we pay you the flat fee. Would you do it through June 30th,
Yeah.
please? So she was very receptive, but she had to bring it to her board. And I have not yet heard back from her on that. The letter did say that the 2 nurses we work with, Native VNA is fine if we wish to pursue an independent or individual agreement with either or both of them. So I did email both of them right away. And I got a response back from one saying, that she let me see.
Respectfully declines.
Yeah, she doesn't know, she's considering her options, not yet sure of her plans. She'll get back to me soon. That's the one nurse that I really wanted to continue with because she does the MAVEN communicable disease follow-ups. So we don't have that. However, now just yesterday, I did get an email from Scott Moles, who's the healthy director in Holliston, one of the other affected towns. And he's reaching out to see what our immediate plans are and our long-term plans. He wants to meet with Nancy Benotti from Medfield, Sean McAuliffe of Hopkinton, me, and himself, to see if we can discuss it. He's started to draft a request for nursing services, and maybe it could be expanded and be shared. I don't know how that would work.
Well, they
But-
can get the Maven on their computer and they can be tied in
Right.
for
Oh, yeah.
each town, and they can do
Oh,
it right
yeah.
at their home.
And
It
that's
might be-
what the
it might
nurse
be
that
end
we
up
work
being more
with
economical.
through Natick VNA, she doesn't even go to Natick VNA. She's doing this on her home computer.
Right.
And that,
Plus, it
I'm
would be
sure
more-
that's what it would be, but I'm talking about the
Right.
intertown
No.
agreement
Yeah.
is what I'm talking
Do
about.
they go and do the home visits too? Because some of the
That's what
diseases,
Natick
they have to
VNA does.
follow up with home visits.
Yep,
It's
TV.
mandated.
Yeah,
They have to.
and that's,
I used to do it, and I
But-
used to handle the data entry in CCON.
so,
Because we didn't have a nurse. And when we got the nurse, then things, it was a lot
So
better.
it may end up
It's
being
a lot of work.
economical anyway. I don't know what the stipend is if we do it by the hour, because just from a medical practice perspective, it's amazing how the Visiting Nurse Association has changed in the last decade. It used to be that, I'd operate on somebody and it's a homebound 85-year-old. Can you go and, do a dressing change every day? And they would say, sure, how many times, where on the body? And then now you do a consultation, you're lucky if you can get them to go twice a week. I
Yeah, I
mean,
think they're
the,
on it.
once
It has
the,
to do with
once
the
it's,
insurance.
once
They've
it's
been destroyed by
capitated,
Medicare audits.
once it's capitated instead of fee for service, people just, they get a fee. So then the game is to do as little as possible for the fee. Where it used to be when you got paid for each time you went, they'd go 50 times.
And Medicare
Without a
said, "I don't wanna
problem.
pay for times."
So it
They
doesn't,
also do the flu clinics
so it
too?
might end up being better for the town anyway.
sometimes they haven't,
'Cause we probably
when
paid a
I
big
need
savings
them,
for it.
they have, but not always.
I would speculate.
So how can we help?
Paid him something like $500.
This is
Well,
the update, you'll keep
do
us
you-
posted,
yeah.
and we should agree with.
I'm
We don't have a
assuming you
budget.
want me to meet with
we
Hopkinton
love
and,
meetings.
yeah.
They spend.
I'll go to another meeting.
And salmon.
Has to be in the basement.
It dropped out of the picture. The budget's there.
spent.
Out of the picture.
Awesome. Go check the
So
box.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah,
That seems challenging.
yeah, so I'm hoping, if I don't hear from Judy Boyko from VNA soon, I'm gonna call her again.
Do we know,
I hope they will continue through June 30th.
do you know what other places like Ashland do?
Mark
They
is-
have 5 hours a week.
I have somebody who's unemployed by now.
A retired person, someone that's semi-retired, I should say. So,
I'm just saying we should.
it took a long time to find people.
What is the budget that we
Maybe,
have?
yeah, but you know what I mean, I don't know.
Like the
I don't know
yearly
what-
budget.
What goes into.
Yeah, I don't know how much
Uh,
time it takes.
It's like
Can't be
30
$800.
3,500, I
Oh,
think.
okay. Oh,
Wow.
All right, so that's more to work with. Well, I
Awesome.
think it's certainly worth talking about the options, because it would be more appealing for whoever might do the work to be able to get a bigger
More,
one at
yeah.
once than have to
Yeah.
hunt and peck around.
Yeah.
And so,
But I
And
mean,
our part
the-
Might be
would
more
the
compelling.
Maven reporting, like, I think there's pieces that you'd say,
that's
if we've got
important.
legally mandated
Yeah.
things that we need to
Yes.
do, and you may say, we
Yeah.
don't have a
Yeah.
great council on aging solution, and the
Right,
talks,
and that
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 kind of goes
can-
away, but
right.
we have to have
But
a
the
Maven
Maven,
solution.
that has to be,
And so
we
that may
need
be the other
somebody.
strategy to kind of figure out if we narrow scope
Yeah.
for the same
Yeah.
compensation,
Yep.
that also may help, because you're like, I
Yeah.
can do this.
Yep.
That's a low jump. Awesome.
okay.
Yeah.
So any doctors want to weigh in with Ellen at any time, feel free. Okay, you want to do the Sadie?
I was totally thinking, I was like, speaking of communicable diseases.
Yeah,
communicable
Okay.
thyroid.
So, do we want to review this, or are we,
I would say for people, thyroid isn't one of the things that usually makes me think of changing the vaccine approach, but I'm not a veterinarian.
Yeah, same here.
She has a lot
I
more
was
legs than most
surprised,
of my
yeah.
patients do. And so I'm happy to defer to the veterinarian so long as they comply with all the other conditions like muzzling and those pieces, but hypothyroidism for people would not change my approach to vaccination.
Right.
But I'm happy to defer to Dr. Roman.
Thought
Is
that was
this different than the
interesting.
one we talked about already?
Yeah.
It was a gastric cancer, so cancer certainly could change
That was
immunization and
chemotherapy,
outcome.
yeah, they're immune suppressed patients.
Right. But like
How old's
th-
this one?
I think this pup's also old, but it's a different
11.
condition. And again, I'd say like, they've got a medical professional that's licensed to take care of dogs, which I'm not.
One up
so-
on us.
Right,
so
exactly,
I'm totally happy to defer to Dr. Roman.
right.
right, I'm happy with that, and also, again, the conditions that they're warned about, and just really keeping the pet away from getting rabies and/or other people. So, all right, so do we have a motion to grant the exemption from rabies vaccination for Sadie?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Really
Darren, you
bracing.
sign this one, please.
Box. Taking off boxes.
Okay, pick a topic.
We did discussion. Do we want
I kind of think maybe,
The disposal works installer?
Is that one gonna be?
I think the flow chart is, if you're wanting to
I
leave
think I
soon,
could
that's a bigger
It's-
job.
That's not a good 10:15 at night
No, I'm not
discussion.
feeling percolating,
Sorry.
so
I agree.
that's
No,
gotta
that's
go
nice.
back on the
7.
All right.
agenda for next
Push it.
time.
Sure.
Flowchart. Oh, yeah, so you can check that box off.
Can't
So
always be as bad
we-
as it was with
Will everybody be here? No.
You know who,
March 7th?
flow chart and counting.
Do you want that on March 7th?
Do you want a pen?
No. Who's not here? Is everybody here March 7th?
I'm not here,
He's
Mark.
not here.
Oh, Mark's not here.
I feel like you're important.
Do it the
for-
21st, I'm not here.
He's like, yeah, you can do that.
That's not really the approach we want.
I have an
Make you stay
idea.
after school.
Like, well, so then, how urgent is
April
it? Do we want
11th.
to push it to the April
April
meeting?
11th.
Because this seems like this has been long-standing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
we'll
Okay,
have, I like it.
yep, that
Okay,
sounds good.
April.
The April 1st meeting.
April 11th.
I feel like we gotta have an April 1st.
Oh, you know what, let's renew the
You're not
permit
gonna
for
be here, April.
Nope.
Pat Teddy.
That'll be all right.
Yes.
Daryl, did you
Is
sign
he in
that?
good stand,
No.
oh, I,
Quiet.
Partway.
He doesn't do much. He's
okay.
Pat a male or a female?
Sir, Pat Teddy.
Is Pat in good standing?
Mr.
Never
You
know.
don't know. Saturday Night Live had a Pat.
Exactly.
I'm
That's what I was
getting to
thinking
what
of.
month we're in, 2, and
That
today,
was
oh, there it is.
My pen ran out of ink.
No one
The one
ever
that was
knows.
used.
See, I'm here. I'm here to serve.
Yeah, she retired the
Okay.
character.
I'll watch the video for the village.
But they never announced it, I don't think.
Okay, so he's in good standing town, he's been an
Well,
installer
he hasn't
before?
installed in a long
Yeah.
time,
Oh.
but, you know, when the time comes, pre-construction.
Oh, okay,
He's a builder more than he is installing.
all right, so do we have a motion to approve the permit for Pat Teddy, subject to pre-construction consultation with the agent?
So moved.
He must have a job.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Darren, you sign this one?
Okay.
Sorry.
Do that sometimes.
They just like to stay active. But most likely he does.
To say about the Sherborn Library, well, wait, tough ones.
Do you want me to just report it for the Sherborn Library? What Rob Scott told me?
Oh, yeah,
That's okay with you?
yes,
I'll be
that
really
sounds great.
quick, just open your ears. Okay, I spoke with Rob Scott, who was an installer in town, and he's a Title V inspector too, and that was who the library project people called to look at the leach field, the D-box, and the tank. He stated that the leach field and the D-box were fine, The tank he thought was okay. He stated that the tank was old, but the tire tracks were over the tank. So somebody drove over the tank. So what he said was when the library gets closer to an opening where the system would be used, he suggested that the tank at that time be checked for structural integrity. To make sure that, he was worried about spider web cracks, something
Like
very
a stress
fine.
fracture almost.
Yes. So that was, he reported to me.
All right, sounds good. So you can track that as things go along if you
Absolutely.
notice something happening over there that signals to you that it's time or whatever.
It's time to go.
And so they're a public water supply, but not a wastewater treatment facility.
Right.
Which brings up the other issue. Are we gonna do a formal review of the proposed condensate discharge?
I
Oh, that has to be
answered
removed.
to,
I mean, it's in direct violation, right?
well,
Yeah, why
Title
would they do
V,
that?
well, Title V wouldn't allow it.
Well, right.
Right.
That's what.
They
we
only
pointed out.
conserve sanitary sewage, so the
Right.
That's
condensate
it.
has to be removed.
Right, but didn't Whitewater reach a different conclusion?
No, not Whitewater,
The contractor?
the contractors who
They're like, oh, no, it's fine.
I found it interesting
Would you
that they
mind
were
explaining
weighing,
this to me?
so at the meeting that Ellen and I went to about the library project, they were saying that they didn't deal with those kind of regulations, and so they weren't addressing
city sewer.
questions we had because they said that's not what we do. So we're not getting involved, and yet they got involved in this one on the condensate, which I just thought was interesting. So, how can we confirm that
Sean-
Sean's fully understood?
Oh,
what
he
was referred?
understands, and
Yes,
he
which I think,
has,
I was really happy that
yes,
he
and
He brought it-
contacted the board
Yes.
to.
Well,
he definitely
That's an assistance.
understands, and he's trying to convince them that they can't do it. They keep telling him, yes, they can. He
Can
wants
ask them
something.
to come to a meeting?
Yep, yep.
He-
Yeah, that's what I
He-
would like to see happen. Let's.
Yeah, they
let-
should come to a meeting.
Yeah, I mean, don't they have to get permission
This is
to
what
do
they're-
any alterations or discharges to the septic? Don't they have to come before
Yeah,
us?
they should.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's,
It's like
Then I
the,
don't-
so they
the
can't,
water
they
is
can't make
constantly
a
dripping in
decision
your
in
faucet.
isolation.
And
With
we
the
have the,
condensate hose going into the tank.
we have the
Water is
code
always
number.
dripping.
Could, well, what Sean has requested is a letter, that the board send them a letter, and that way you could say, no,
Section,
it cannot, the condensate cannot go
Do we
into
have a written
the
report to say what they're
sewage
proposing?
it's right
system,
there, 310.
septic system.
We
And then
already,
they might
Oh, yeah.
request a meeting. If you don't agree, request a meeting, put that
Well,
in
we could just
the-
provide the citation, like,
Yeah.
here's what the
He
regulations say.
has.
I don't understand
Send
why
an
they
email.
Why do we have a
are
contractor who's
saying,
doing stuff that we say we don't want you to do?
If
We
you
have
were
to
at this
stop
meeting
trying
with
to
us.
Yeah.
understand.
You would,
accept,
I
no,
hate
deny.
to talk about this too much, but I was amazed at their lack of preparation for the meeting, that they knew what the topics were going to be.
The contractor.
Yeah.
So who
So I'm not
who is
super surprised.
responsible for doing the construction oversight on the library and ensuring that all regulations are being complied with?
The project,
Is there a project manager?
there's
Is
a
that who you
project
mean?
manager.
And who is that person?
I forget his name, but there is a
I thought it was Sean, isn't it Sean?
project manager.
No,
it's
Sean's
an
a-
outside, it's
Sean's a
a
CM&D
contract.
director. yeah.
coordinator for the whole project.
Well, they need to be in this loop too, because they should be ensuring that all work is done in accordance with applicable
Right.
regulations.
All right, so to make it
Yeah, I
simple
mean,
and
That's their
shorter,
job.
That's what makes sense.
Yeah.
since Sean's interested in if the Board of Health can send a letter to the effect of basically what you guys researched, can you put together a letter using the information from then? We
Or
can
could
vote on
Mark-
whether we're
I would be
authorizing.
more
I have
comfortable
the
with Mark
reference, we
drafting.
can
Oh,
attach.
Could you draft the letter? I don't know what to say to these
It's
people.
gonna
Just
be
say
short and
no.
sweet, that's for
And,
sure.
oh, no.
As per blah blah blah, that
Regulation.
condensate cannot be discharged into the.
Only sanitary
Septic.
sewage per this regulation can be discharged.
But go the one step.
No, I think
That
say
means,
this
you know,
can't
That
be
means
done, right.
condensate is not sanitary
Yeah.
sewage.
Condensate, and there was another.
Define
I've heard of
sanitary
anybody
sewage.
connecting it to the
It's
septic
not
Right.
system.
allowed.
But if you can draft the technical, whichever one of you can draft the technical guts, give
I'll be
that to
glad.
Ellen, and you can say, because in a minute,
And
I'm
who
gonna
is
ask
this
if the
going
board's
to?
gonna vote.
Who is this going to?
That might be something you have to find out. Ask Sean, should we
Okay.
mail it directly to the
GC.
project manager? And if so, what's his contact information? Or do we address
I
it to
could leave.
Sean to forward it
leave?
to them? And then also say
day
if they
started
wanna
very
discuss it further, they need to come to
The
the
co-chair for
too.
NIOP, and we had the commissioner from DEP speak this morning, so I had to make sure I was
Okay,
there by
now.
7:30.
board.
Yes. I'm paying attention.
Do we have a motion to approve that this letter be sent to someone that Ellen will identify who's most appropriate, either the project manager?
And then CC Sean and whoever else.
Yeah, or vice versa.
So
whichever way.
moved.
Seconded.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And Rick, anytime you want to stop, we're really down to the paperwork signing of things, so you can feel free to. Yes, so we're just wrapping up some signing of warrants and payroll agenda items for the next meeting, but that'll be posted, and review of minutes, approval of minutes. And those will be posted too, when they're approved. Thank you. Good night. Okay.